The rain came down like knives. Cold. Relentless. The kind that soaked through skin and settled into bone, turning the forest floor into a slick, treacherous maze of mud and roots. Aria's lungs burned with every gasping breath, her legs screaming in protest as she stumbled through the darkness, branches whipping against her face, tearing at her already shredded cloak. Blood ran warm down her temple, mixing with the rain, blurring her vision. She couldn't stop. Couldn't slow down. Behind her, the howls were getting closer. They'd found her at the border. 3 wolves. Maybe 4. She hadn't stayed long enough to count. The raid had come without warning, tearing through the small settlement where she'd been hiding for the past 2 months, working in silence, keeping her head down, pretending to be nothing. Just another displaced wolf without a pack. Another nobody. That's what she'd become good at. Surviving by being invisible. By swallowing her pride and her power and everything that made her dangerous. But they'd known. Somehow, they'd known exactly who she was. The memory of their leader's voice still echoed in her ears, cold and triumphant, as he'd kicked down the door of her tiny room above the tavern. "Found you, little flame. The king's been looking for you for a very long time." The king. The words had sent ice through her veins, sharper than any blade. Because there was only one king who would send his wolves to hunt her down. Only one ruler whose name was spoken in whispers, whose reputation for cruelty had spread across every territory, every pack, every corner of the realm. The Lycan King. The one they called Heartless. The one whose fortress was a place wolves entered and rarely left. The one who had united the packs under his rule not through diplomacy or honor, but through fear and absolute, merciless power. And he wanted her. Aria's foot caught on a root, and she went down hard, her palms slamming into the mud, pain shooting up her wrists. She bit back a cry, forcing herself up, forcing her legs to keep moving even though every muscle was shaking, even though her body was begging her to stop, to give in, to let them take her. Because what was the point? She was one wolf against an entire hunting party. One exhausted, injured, powerless wolf who hadn't shifted in over a year, who'd locked her other half away so deep inside herself that sometimes she wondered if it was even still there. The howls split the night again, closer now. Close enough that she could hear the crashing of bodies through the underbrush, the excited yips and snarls of wolves who'd caught the scent of their prey. They were playing with her. They could have caught her 10 minutes ago if they'd wanted to. But this was a game to them. A hunt. And she was the terrified rabbit running for her life. Thunder cracked overhead, so loud it shook the trees, and the sky opened up even harder, the rain turning into a blinding sheet of water. Aria's foot slipped again, but she caught herself this time, grabbing onto a low-hanging branch, her fingers numb and clumsy. She had to find somewhere to hide. Somewhere to catch her breath, to think, to figure out what the hell she was going to do. Because running wasn't working. She couldn't outrun trained hunters. She couldn't outrun wolves who were faster, stronger, better fed, better rested, better everything. A flash of lightning illuminated the forest ahead, and for just a second, she saw it. A break in the trees. A rocky outcropping rising up from the forest floor, dark and jagged, with what looked like a small opening at its base. A cave. Maybe. Or a crevice deep enough to squeeze into, to wedge herself into some crack where they couldn't follow. It wasn't much. But it was something. She ran for it, her body moving on pure survival instinct now, her vision tunneling down to just that one dark shape in the storm. The ground rose beneath her feet, turning rocky and uneven, and she half climbed, half scrambled up the slope, her hands scraping against stone, her knees slamming into rock. The opening was smaller than she'd thought. Barely wide enough for her shoulders. But she didn't care. She threw herself into it, squeezing through the gap, feeling the stones scrape against her ribs, her hips, catching on her cloak and nearly choking her before she managed to twist free and tumble into the darkness beyond. She landed hard on cold stone, the impact knocking the wind out of her. For a moment, she just lay there, gasping, shaking, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might actually break through her chest. The sound of the storm was muffled now, distant, replaced by the hollow echo of her own ragged breathing and the steady drip of water somewhere deeper in the cave. Cave. It was actually a cave. She could feel the space around her, could sense the way the air moved, cool and damp and carrying the mineral smell of deep earth. She forced herself to sit up, to press her back against the rough stone wall, to pull her knees to her chest and try to make herself as small as possible. Her whole body was shaking. From cold, from exhaustion, from the adrenaline that was still flooding her system, making her hands tremble and her teeth chatter. Outside, the howls had stopped. That was worse. So much worse. Because it meant they were close. It meant they were searching. It meant they'd probably seen her go into the cave and were deciding right now whether to come in after her or to simply wait her out. She was trapped. She knew it. They knew it. This wasn't an escape. It was just delaying the inevitable. Aria closed her eyes, pressing her forehead against her knees, feeling the burn of tears behind her eyelids. She wouldn't cry. She refused to cry. She'd survived too much, come too far, fought too hard to fall apart now. But God, she was tired. So tired. Tired of running. Tired of hiding. Tired of being afraid every single second of every single day. Tired of living like a ghost, like something less than wolf, less than human, less than anything. The mark on her shoulder blade began to burn. It always did when she was afraid. When her emotions ran too high, when her control started to slip. It was a reminder. A brand. A curse. The silver crescent moon that had appeared on her skin the night everything had changed. The night she discovered what she really was, what kind of power lived inside her blood. The night her pack had looked at her with fear instead of love, with suspicion instead of trust. The night her own father had called her an abomination and told her to leave before he was forced to kill her himself. She pressed her hand against her shoulder, trying to smother the heat, trying to push it back down. She couldn't afford to lose control. Not now. Not ever. Because if she did, if she let even a fraction of that power slip free, they would know exactly where she was. Every wolf for miles would feel it. Would sense it. Would come running to see the freak, the cursed one, the girl who carried something ancient and terrible inside her skin. A sound made her freeze. Not a howl. Not the crash of bodies through the forest. Something else. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. The scrape of boots against stone. Coming from inside the cave. From deeper in. From the darkness behind her. Aria's breath stopped. Her heart stopped. Her entire world narrowed down to that sound, those footsteps, getting closer, getting louder, echoing off the stone walls in a steady, unhurried rhythm. Someone was in here. Someone had been in here the whole time. She wasn't alone. She tried to move, tried to scramble to her feet, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Her muscles were locked, frozen, caught between the instinct to run and the knowledge that there was nowhere left to go. She was trapped between the hunters outside and whoever was inside, and she didn't know which was worse. The footsteps stopped. A voice came out of the darkness. Low. Male. Carrying an edge of something that made her skin prickle with awareness. You're bleeding. Not a question. A statement. Calm. Almost conversational. Like they were discussing the weather instead of the fact that she was cornered and terrified and covered in mud and blood. Aria's throat closed up. She couldn't speak. Couldn't move. Could barely breathe. The wound on your head, the voice continued, still in that same low, measured tone. It needs to be cleaned. You'll get an infection if you leave it. What kind of nightmare was this? What kind of sick game? Aria forced her eyes to adjust to the darkness, searching for the source of the voice, but she could barely make out shapes in the blackness. Just a deeper shadow among shadows, a suggestion of height and breadth, of someone standing perfectly still about 10 feet away. Who are you? The words came out as barely more than a whisper, hoarse and shaking. A pause. Then, someone who's been looking for you for a very long time, Aria. The world tilted sideways. He knew her name. This stranger in the dark, this voice that didn't belong to any of the hunters outside, knew her name. She tried to swallow, but her mouth was too dry, her throat too tight. "How do you?" "The wolves outside," he interrupted, his voice never rising, never losing that careful control. "They're not going to leave. They'll wait until dawn if they have to. Until you're weak enough that you can't fight back. Until they can drag you out of here and deliver you exactly where they've been ordered to take you." Her hands curled into fists against the stone. "And where's that?" Another pause. Longer this time. Heavy with meaning. When he spoke again, something had changed in his voice. Something darker. Something that sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with cold. "To me." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and terrible and somehow inevitable. Aria's mind was racing, trying to make sense of it, trying to understand what he was saying, what it meant, why he was here in this cave in the middle of nowhere in the middle of a storm. Unless... No, that was impossible. The Lycan King didn't hunt his own prey. He sent his wolves to do it. He stayed in his fortress, surrounded by his guards and his power and his reputation, ruling from a distance, letting fear do the work for him. He didn't chase runaway wolves through the forest in the rain. He didn't hide in caves and speak in low voices and, "You're afraid," the voice said, and this time there was something almost like curiosity in it. "I can hear your heart. It's racing. But it's not just fear, is it? There's something else. Something interesting." Aria pressed harder against the wall, wishing she could sink into the stone, wishing she could disappear. "Stay away from me. I'm not going to hurt you." He said it simply, like it was a fact, like his word was law and she should just accept it. "But I'm also not going to let you go back out there. Those wolves? They'll tear you apart before they ever get you back to the fortress. They're young, undisciplined, too eager to prove themselves. I've seen what happens when hunting parties get overzealous with their prey." The casual way he said it, like he'd witnessed it before, like it was just another Tuesday, made her stomach turn. "Then what do you want? Right now?" Another step closer. Still slow. Still measured. Like he was approaching something wild that might bolt at any sudden movement. "I want you to let me look at that wound. I want you to drink some water. And I want you to understand that whether you believe me or not, whether you trust me or not, I am the only thing standing between you and a very unpleasant fate." Light flared in the darkness, sudden and bright and making Aria flinch back against the wall, her eyes watering from the shock of it. It took her a moment to realize it was just a small flame, cupped in the palm of a hand, a tiny sphere of fire that cast flickering shadows across the cave walls and illuminated the face of the man standing in front of her. And God help her, she understood immediately why they called him Heartless. He was beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful, in the way a storm was beautiful. Sharp edges and hard lines and a face that looked like it had been carved from marble by someone who understood cruelty. Strong jaw, high cheekbones, a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. And eyes, God, his eyes, dark and intense, and looking at her with a focus that made her feel like she was being dissected, examined, studied like something rare and dangerous and infinitely interesting. He was taller than she'd expected, broader. Dressed in dark clothes that looked expensive even covered in rain, his black hair pushed back from his face, damp and falling just past his shoulders. There was a scar running along his left jaw, pale against tan skin, and another disappearing into his color. Marks of violence. Proof that even kings could bleed. This was Damien, the Lycan King. The one who'd united the packs through blood and fear. The one whose word was absolute. The one who'd been searching for her, hunting her, wanting her for reasons she still didn't understand. And he was standing in front of her, holding fire in his palm, looking at her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. "You're smaller than I thought you'd be," he said, tilting his head slightly, his gaze moving over her with clinical assessment. "And you look half dead. When's the last time you ate? Slept? Actually took care of yourself instead of just running?" Aria's jaw tightened. "That's none of your business." Everything about you is my business. He said it matter-of-factly. Not arrogant. Not cruel. Just true. Like it was already decided. Already done. You've been running for 14 months. Staying in border towns where no one asks questions. Working jobs that pay in cash. Keeping your head down. Never shifting. Never using your power. Never staying anywhere longer than 6 weeks. His eyes locked onto hers. Did you really think I wouldn't find you eventually? The burn on her shoulder blade intensified, responding to her spike of panic, her surge of anger. She forced it down, forced it back, but she saw the exact moment he noticed. Saw his eyes flick to her shoulder even though it was covered by her cloak, even though there was no way he could see the mark. But he knew. Somehow he knew. That's why you're here, she said slowly, understanding clicking into place like pieces of a puzzle she'd been avoiding for over a year. The mark. The power. That's what you want. Damien's expression didn't change. Among other things. I won't help you. The words came out stronger than she felt. Braver. Whatever you think I can do, whatever you think I am, I won't. Do you know what they'll do to you out there? His voice cut through hers, still low but carrying an edge now, a hardness. The packs that rejected you? The wolves who called you cursed? They'll come for you. Not just my wolves. Everyone. Because word is spreading, Aria. Word about what you are. About what lives in your blood. And there are wolves out there who would rather see you dead than see that power in anyone's hands. Even mine. She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she was nobody, that her power was nothing. But she couldn't. Because he was right. She'd felt it these past few months. The way the hunts were getting more frequent, more intense. The way wolves looked at her with something worse than hatred in their eyes. Fear. The kind of fear that made people do terrible things. So what? She managed. You're offering me protection? In exchange for what? My freedom? My will? Everything that makes me who I am. I'm offering you a choice, Damien said, and for the first time, something flickered in those dark eyes. Something that might have been understanding. Or might have been something more dangerous. You can go back out there. Try to run again. See how far you get before the next hunting party finds you. Before someone less controlled decides to end this hunt permanently. He paused. Or you can come with me. To the fortress. Where you'll be protected. Where you'll be safe. Where you can finally stop running and figure out what the hell that mark on your shoulder actually means. The flame in his palm grew brighter, casting his face in sharp relief, turning his eyes into pools of shadow. But understand this. If you come with me, it's not as my prisoner. It's as someone under my protection. Which means you play by my rules. You stay where I can see you. And you don't run. Because if you run again, Aria, I will find you. And next time, I might not be in such a generous mood. Generous. As if any of this was generous. As if being backed into a corner and given the choice between certain death and captivity was somehow a gift. But the worst part, the absolutely terrible part, was that he was right. She was out of options. Out of places to hide. Out of time. The wolves outside would wait until dawn, and when the sun came up, they'd come in after her, and she'd have to choose between fighting back, revealing exactly what she was, or letting them take her. At least if she went with him willingly, she might have some control. Some ability to negotiate. Some chance of figuring out what he really wanted before he tried to take it from her. How do I know you won't just kill me? Her voice was barely audible over the sound of rain outside. How do I know this isn't all just another trap? Damien's eyes never left hers. You don't. You have to trust me. A laugh bubbled up in her throat, bitter and slightly hysterical. Trust you? The Heartless King? The one who's kept every wolf in this realm from tearing each other apart for the last 5 years, he interrupted. The one who's maintained peace through strength because diplomacy doesn't work with predators. The one who's built something stable in a world that's always been chaos. He took another step closer, and she could feel the heat from the flame, could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I am not a good man, Aria. I don't pretend to be. But I keep my word. And I'm giving you my word right now that if you come with me, I will protect you from everything and everyone who wants to use you or hurt you or destroy you. The mark on her shoulder blazed hot enough to make her gasp, hot enough that she couldn't hide it anymore. And in that moment, something happened. Something she hadn't felt in over a year. A pulse of power, bright and silver and ancient, rippling out from that mark, filling the cave with a light that wasn't from Damien's flame, but from something deeper, something that came from inside her own skin. The flame in Damien's hand flickered and went out. But the silver light remained, emanating from Aria, turning the cave into something otherworldly, something beautiful and terrifying. She could see everything now. The rough stone walls. The water trickling down from cracks in the ceiling. The ancient symbols carved into the rock above Damien's head, glowing faintly in response to her power. And Damien himself, standing perfectly still. Not afraid. Not reaching for a weapon. Just watching her. With something in his expression that looked almost like reverence. "There you are," he said softly. "The silver flame. The one the prophecies spoke about. The one who could burn the world down or save it, depending on which path she chose." He didn't move, didn't try to approach, just held her gaze. "Do you understand now why everyone's been looking for you? Why I've been looking for you?" The light was fading now, sinking back into her skin, the mark cooling to a dull ache. Aria felt exhausted, drained, like that one brief flash of power had taken everything she had left. She slumped against the wall, her legs giving out, and before she could hit the ground, Damien was there. Moving faster than any wolf should move, catching her, easing her down gently, his hands strong and surprisingly careful. "Easy," he murmured, and his voice had changed again. Softer now. Almost gentle. "You haven't used your power in a long time. Your body's not ready for it. You need rest. Food. Training." She wanted to push him away. Wanted to tell him to stop touching her, stop being careful with her, stop acting like he gave a damn whether she lived or died. But she was so tired. So incredibly bone-deep tired. And his hands were warm and steady, and for just a moment, she let herself lean into that strength. "If I go with you," she whispered, her eyes already starting to close, exhaustion pulling her under, "what happens to me?" She felt him shift, felt him lift her like she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest. The last thing she heard before the darkness took her was his voice, low and certain and carrying a promise she didn't know whether to trust. "That depends entirely on what you choose to become." And then there was nothing but the sound of rain and the warmth of a stranger's arms and the terrifying certainty that her life would never be the same again. And before we go deeper, if you're already hooked, if you want to know what happens when Aria wakes up in the king's fortress, surrounded by wolves who want her dead and a ruler who might be her salvation or her doom, hit that subscribe button. Because here at Shayla's Romance Library, we don't tell soft stories. We tell the ones that burn. Asterisk, asterisk. Aria woke to silk. That was the first thing she registered. Not stone. Not dirt. Not the rough wool blanket she'd been sleeping under for the past 2 months in that tiny room above the tavern. Silk. Cool and smooth against her skin, sliding like water when she shifted, expensive in a way that made her stomach clench with unease. Because silk meant wealth. Silk meant power. Silk meant she was exactly where she'd feared she'd end up. The fortress. She kept her eyes closed for another moment, taking inventory. Her head still ached, but it was a dull throb now instead of the sharp, stabbing pain from before. Someone had cleaned the wound. Bandaged it. Her body felt heavy, sluggish, like she'd slept for days instead of hours. But underneath the exhaustion, she could feel something else. A fullness. Like her body had finally been fed properly after months of scraps and missed meals. Had he fed her while she was unconscious? The thought made her skin crawl and her cheeks flush at the same time. The intimacy of it. The violation. The care. She forced her eyes open. The room was massive. That was the second shock. High ceilings that disappeared into shadow, despite the sunlight streaming through tall, narrow windows set into stone walls so thick they could probably withstand a siege. The bed she was lying in could have fit 5 people comfortably, draped in fabrics that looked like they cost more than everything she'd owned in her entire life. Dark wood furniture. Thick rugs covering cold stone floors. A fireplace big enough to walk into, currently crackling with a fire that filled the room with warmth. This wasn't a cell. This wasn't a dungeon. This was a bedroom. A beautiful, luxurious, completely terrifying bedroom in what could only be the Lycan King's fortress. Aria sat up slowly, her body protesting, and realized with another jolt that she was wearing different clothes. A soft shirt that fell past her hips. Clean. Comfortable. Her own clothes, her muddy, blood-stained, torn clothes, were gone. Someone had undressed her. Washed her. Dressed her in clothes that smelled like cedar and something else, something masculine and earthy that made her pulse kick up. "You're awake." She nearly jumped out of her skin. Her head whipped toward the voice, and there he was. Damien, the Lycan King. Sitting in a chair by the fireplace like he'd been there for hours, one ankle crossed over the opposite knee, a book resting on his lap. He looked different in the daylight. Less like a nightmare and more like a man. Still dangerous. Still powerful. Still carrying that edge of something cold and controlled. But the firelight softened him somehow, catching on the sharp planes of his face, turning his dark eyes warm. He closed the book and set it aside, giving her his full attention. "How do you feel?" Aria's throat was dry. She swallowed, trying to find her voice. "Like I was kidnapped. You passed out. I brought you somewhere safe. That's not kidnapping." His tone was mild, almost conversational, but there was steel underneath. A reminder that he was used to being obeyed. Used to his word being law. "You had my clothes removed." She kept her voice flat, refusing to show the panic fluttering in her chest. "I had a healer tend to your wounds and get you clean. You were covered in blood and mud and God knows what else. You needed medical attention." He tilted his head slightly. "If you're asking whether I personally undressed you, the answer is no. I have people for that. People." Like she was a task. A problem to be solved. Something to be managed. Aria pulled the blankets higher, suddenly very aware of how exposed she felt in this enormous bed, in this enormous room, with him watching her like she was a puzzle he was determined to figure out. "Where are we?" She already knew, but she needed to hear him say it. Needed to confirm that her worst fears had come true. "My fortress. The capital. You're in the North Tower, which is private. No one comes up here without my permission." He stood, and even that simple movement was controlled, graceful, predatory. He moved to a small table near the window and poured water from a pitcher into a glass. "You've been asleep for 36 hours. Your body was shutting down. Exhaustion, dehydration, malnourishment. Another week, and you would have collapsed somewhere without anyone to help you." He walked toward her, and every instinct in her body screamed to move back, to get away. But she forced herself to stay still, to hold his gaze as he approached. He stopped at the edge of the bed and held out the glass. "Drink." It wasn't a request. But it also wasn't cruel. Just matter of fact. Like he expected her to listen because listening made sense, not because he was forcing her. Aria stared at the glass, then at him, searching his face for any sign of deception, any hint of what he was really thinking. His expression was unreadable. A mask of calm control that gave away nothing. She took the glass. Her fingers brushed his, and a shock of something electric ran up her arm. She saw his eyes flicker, saw the barest hint of reaction before it was locked away again. He felt it too. Whatever this was between them. This pull that didn't make sense, that shouldn't exist. The water was cold and clean and tasted like life itself. She drank it in 4 long gulps, her body crying out for more, but she forced herself to slow down, to not make herself sick. When she finished, Damien took the glass from her without a word and refilled it, bringing it back. She drank that one too. "Thank you," she said, hating how her voice shook slightly. Hating that she had to thank him for basic kindness when he was the reason she was here in the first place. Damien set the empty glass on the bedside table and stepped back, giving her space. "You're not a prisoner, Aria. You can leave this room whenever you want. You can explore the fortress, the grounds. I'll assign you a guard for your protection, but they're not there to keep you locked up. They're there to make sure no one hurts you. Protection from what? She pulled her knees up under the blankets, wrapping her arms around them. From who? From everyone who's heard the rumors about you. He moved back toward the fireplace, leaning against the mantel, his posture deceptively relaxed. The packs are unsettled. There's been talk of a power that could upset the balance. A wolf marked by ancient magic. A prophecy that speaks of either salvation or destruction. His eyes found hers across the room. You're a threat, Aria. Or a weapon. Depending on who's doing the talking. And there are wolves in my court who would prefer you dead rather than risk whatever chaos you might bring. The casual way he said it sent ice through her veins. And you? What do you prefer? I prefer understanding what I'm dealing with before I make decisions. He crossed his arms over his chest, and she noticed for the first time how broad his shoulders were, how the simple black shirt he wore did nothing to hide the strength underneath. I've spent the last 14 months tracking you. Watching you. Trying to figure out what you are, what you can do, why the prophecies point to you specifically. And do you know what I found? She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up again. A girl who's terrified of herself. His voice was quieter now, but somehow more intense. A girl who'd rather starve and live in squalor than use the power that lives in her blood. A girl who's been running not just from me, but from what she is. From what she could become. He pushed off from the mantel, taking a step closer. Why? What are you so afraid of? The mark on her shoulder blade began to burn again, responding to her surge of emotion. Aria dug her nails into her palms, using the pain to center herself, to keep control. You don't know anything about me. I know you were exiled from your pack when you were 17. I know your father was the alpha of the Silvermoon territory until he stepped down in disgrace after his only daughter was revealed to be carrying a curse. Damien's voice was relentless, each word landing like a blow. I know you spent 6 months in a border town being studied by a witch who tried to remove your mark and nearly killed you in the process. I know you've been alone ever since. No pack. No family. No one. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. If you know so much, then you know why I run. You know what happens when people find out what I am. I know what happened when ignorant wolves found out, he corrected. Wolves who were afraid of anything they couldn't control. Wolves who chose fear over understanding. He moved closer to the bed, his presence overwhelming, magnetic. I am not afraid of you, Aria. And I didn't bring you here to hurt you or use you or lock you away. I brought you here because you belong here. Because whatever power lives inside you, whatever destiny the prophecies speak of, you can't face it alone. You'll die. Or worse, you'll let that power consume you, and then everyone dies. She stared at him, trying to process what he was saying, trying to understand what he wanted from her. You're talking about the prophecy. The one about the silver flame. But prophecies aren't real. They're just stories. Myths that wolves tell to make sense of things they don't understand. Are they? Damien's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Then explain the mark on your shoulder. Explain how you can summon silver fire without shifting. Explain how every ancient site in this realm has been lighting up over the past year, responding to something, calling to something. Calling to you. The room felt too small suddenly. Too warm. She could feel the walls closing in, could feel the weight of his words, the terrible possibility that he might be right. That everything she'd been running from, everything she'd tried to deny, might actually be true. I don't want this, she whispered. I didn't ask for any of this. No one asks for destiny. Damien's voice had softened, and when she looked up at him, she saw something in his eyes that looked almost like sympathy. Almost like understanding. But running from it doesn't make it go away. It just means you're unprepared when it finds you anyway. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. His fingers were warm, calloused, gentle in a way that didn't match his reputation at all. I've been called Heartless for as long as I can remember. Do you know why? She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Because I made a choice a long time ago to care about survival more than sentiment. To care about stability more than popularity. To do what needed to be done, no matter how cruel it seemed, because the alternative was watching everything burn. His thumb traced along her jawline, sending shivers down her spine. I am not a kind man, Aria. I am not gentle. I have done things that would horrify you, made decisions that cost lives, built my throne on blood and fear and absolute authority. But I did it to prevent something worse. To prevent the chaos that tears packs apart, that turns wolves against each other, that destroys everything. He pulled his hand back, and she immediately felt the loss of that warmth, that contact. You think I'm the monster in your story. And maybe I am. But I'm also the only one strong enough to protect you from all the other monsters who want to use you or kill you or twist your power into something terrible. Aria's heart was racing, her mind spinning. Everything he was saying felt like a trap and the truth at the same time. Like he was offering her something she desperately needed while also reminding her that accepting it would cost her everything. What do you want from me? The question came out raw, desperate. Really? Not the political answer. Not the version you'd give your court. What do you actually want? Damien was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching hers, like he was weighing how much truth to give her. When he spoke, his voice was low, intimate, meant only for her. I want to know if the prophecies are real. I want to understand what kind of power lives inside you and whether it's something that can be controlled or something that will consume everything in its path. He paused. And I want to know why, when I'm standing this close to you, every instinct I have is telling me that you're mine to protect. Mine to guard. Mine to keep safe even if it means going to war with every pack in this realm. The air left her lungs. The world narrowed down to just him, just those words, just the intensity in his eyes that made her feel seen in a way she'd never been seen before. Not as a curse. Not as a weapon. But as something precious. Something worth protecting. That's insane, she managed. You don't even know me. I've been watching you for 14 months. I know you better than you think. His lips curved into something darker, more dangerous. I know you steal bread from markets, but leave coins hidden in places the vendors will find them later. I know you work twice as hard as anyone else to prove you're not weak. I know you cry in your sleep sometimes, and you always wake up before dawn, and you haven't let yourself shift in over a year because you're terrified of what might happen if you do. Each word was like being stripped bare, exposed, vulnerable. He did know her. He'd been watching, studying, learning everything about her while she'd been oblivious, thinking she was invisible. That's creepy, she said, but there was no heat in it. Just shock. Just the overwhelming realization that she wasn't anonymous anymore. Wasn't invisible. Was probably never going to be invisible again. That's thorough. Damien straightened, putting a bit more distance between them, like he could sense she was overwhelmed. I don't take chances with things that matter. And whether you believe it or not, you matter. The prophecies matter. What happens next matters. A knock on the door interrupted whatever she might have said. Damien's expression shifted immediately, becoming colder, more remote. The mask sliding back into place. Come in. The door opened and a woman entered. Tall, elegant, with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that looked like they could cut through stone. She was wearing dark leathers, practical and well-worn, with weapons strapped to her thighs and a confidence that marked her as someone important. Someone dangerous. My king. She bowed her head slightly, then turned her attention to Aria. Those sharp eyes assessed her in a single sweep, and Aria felt herself being catalogued, judged, measured. The girl is awake. Her name is Aria, Damien said, and there was a warning edge in his voice. And you'll address her with respect. The woman's eyebrows rose slightly, but she inclined her head. Aria. I'm Talia, head of the King's Guard. I've been assigned to your protection detail. Aria pulled the blankets tighter around herself, feeling suddenly very small under that sharp gaze. I don't need protection. Yes, you do. Talia's voice was matter-of-fact, not unkind, but not particularly warm either. There are currently 7 wolves in this fortress who've made it clear they'd prefer you dead. Another dozen who are undecided. And word is spreading beyond these walls. Give it a week, and every pack in the realm will know you're here. You absolutely need protection. 7. 7 wolves wanted her dead, and she'd been here less than 2 days. Aria felt sick. Damien moved toward the door, toward Talia, his body language shifting into something more formal, more distant. The king instead of the man who'd just been touching her face, speaking to her like she mattered. I have a council meeting in an hour. Talia will stay with you, answer your questions, show you around if you want. There's food in the sitting room next door. Clothes in the wardrobe that should fit. You're free to go anywhere in the fortress, but I'd suggest staying in the north wing for now. Less hostility. He paused at the door, looking back at her over his shoulder. We'll talk more tonight. After the council meeting. There are things you need to know. Things about the prophecy. About what's coming. His eyes held hers. Rest. Eat. Get your strength back. Because whether you're ready or not, your destiny is already in motion. And I need you strong enough to face it. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that sounded like finality. Like a door closing on her old life. On the possibility of escape. On everything she'd been before she woke up in this fortress, wearing silk and surrounded by wolves who wanted her dead. Talia moved to the windows, checking something outside before turning back to face her. He's not wrong, you know. About you being in danger. The court is divided. Some see you as a threat. Others see you as an opportunity. Either way, you're valuable. Which makes you a target. Aria found her voice. And what do you see me as? Talia was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Then she smiled, and it transformed her face, made her look younger, less severe. Honestly, I see you as a girl who's in way over her head and trying not to drown. But I also see someone the king has taken a personal interest in. And that means something. He doesn't do that lightly. Doesn't let people into his private spaces. Doesn't watch over them while they sleep for 36 hours straight. Heat flooded Aria's cheeks. He did what? He sat right there. Talia nodded toward the chair by the fireplace. Didn't leave once. Had meals brought up. Refused to attend meetings. Just sat there. Watching. Like he was afraid you'd disappear if he looked away. She tilted her head. In the 5 years I've served him, I've never seen him care about anyone like that. So whatever you are to him, whatever this is between you, it's real. And it's dangerous. Because a king who cares is a king who can be manipulated. A king who can be hurt. The words settled over Aria like a weight. Because she'd felt it too. That pull. That connection. That inexplicable sense that something between them had clicked into place the moment their eyes met in that cave. But feeling it and accepting it were two very different things. I'm not trying to manipulate anyone, she said quietly. I just want to survive. I know. Talia's expression softened. And for what it's worth, I'll do everything I can to make sure you do. Not because I'm ordered to, but because I think maybe you're exactly what he needs. What we all need. Even if none of us really understand why yet. She moved toward the door to the sitting room. Come on. Let's get some food in you. Then we'll figure out what comes next. One step at a time. That's all any of us can do. Aria climbed out of the massive bed on shaky legs, her body still weak from days of running and fear and exhaustion. But as she followed Talia toward the sitting room, toward food and answers and whatever came next, she realized something that both terrified and steadied her. She wasn't running anymore. For better or worse, she'd stopped running. And now she had to figure out what it meant to stand still. To face what she was. To accept the protection of a king who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his entire life. Even if she had no idea what that question was. Even if she was terrified of what the answer might cost them both. The sitting room was smaller than the bedroom, but no less luxurious. Plush chairs arranged around a low table, thick carpets that muffled every footstep, and windows that overlooked a courtyard 3 stories below where wolves in human form were training, sparring with weapons, running drills, moving with the kind of coordinated precision that spoke of years of discipline. But it was the food that made Aria's legs weak all over again. Bread. Fresh bread that was still warm, releasing steam when Talia tore off a piece and handed it to her. Cheese. Fruit. sliced meat that smelled like herbs and smoke, a pot of soup that filled the air with the scent of vegetables and something rich and savory. More food than Aria had seen in one place in months. Maybe years. Her hands trembled as she took the bread. She tried to eat slowly, to be dignified, but her body had other ideas. She was ravenous. Starving in a way that went beyond hunger, beyond the last few months of scraping by. This was deeper. Older. The kind of starvation that came from never quite having enough. From always being on the edge of survival. Talia didn't comment. Just poured tea and sat across from her, giving her space, letting her eat without judgment or questions. It was a kindness Aria hadn't expected. A grace she didn't know how to accept. Slow down, Talia said gently when Aria reached for a third piece of bread. Your stomach's not used to this much food at once. You'll make yourself sick. Aria forced herself to stop, even though everything in her was screaming to keep eating, to store up as much as possible before it was taken away. Old habits. Old fears. The instinct of someone who'd learned too young that nothing was guaranteed. When's the last time you had a real meal? Talia's voice was curious, not accusatory. Aria thought about it. Actually thought about it. I don't know. Months? Maybe longer. She looked down at her hands, at the crumbs clinging to her fingers. I worked in a tavern for a while. They let me eat the scraps. But before that, I was in a border town where food was scarce. And before that, she trailed off. Before that was a blur of running and hiding and stealing what she could and going to bed hungry more nights than not. Before that was being thrown out of her pack with nothing but the clothes on her back and a mark on her shoulder that burned like a brand. You don't have to worry about that here, Talia said quietly. Whatever else happens, you'll be fed. You'll be clothed. You'll be safe. The king doesn't do things halfway. If he's decided to protect you, then you're under his care completely. The words should have been comforting. Should have made her feel grateful, relieved. Instead, they just made her feel trapped. Because care came with expectations. Protection came with a price. And she didn't know what Damien would ask of her when it came time to collect. She sipped her tea, letting the warmth spread through her chest, trying to find her center. Trying to think past the fear and exhaustion and overwhelming confusion. Talia, can I ask you something? Of course. Why is he called Heartless? Really? Not the official story. The truth. Talia was quiet for a long moment, her eyes distant, like she was looking at something Aria couldn't see. When she spoke, her voice was careful, measured. Because 5 years ago, when he took control of the territories, he did it by killing his own father. The words hung in the air like smoke. Aria's cup stopped halfway to her lips. What? His father was the previous Lycan King. Brutal. Tyrannical. Started wars for sport and let the packs tear each other apart because he believed only the strong deserved to survive. Under his rule, thousands died. Entire bloodlines were wiped out. The realm was on the edge of collapse. Talia's eyes found Aria's. Damien challenged him for the throne. In front of the entire court. In front of every alpha and representative from every pack. And when his father refused to yield, refused to step down peacefully, Damien killed him. With his bare hands. Showed no mercy. No hesitation. No emotion. Aria's stomach turned. She set her cup down carefully, afraid her hands would shake. He killed his own father. He saved the realm, Talia corrected. But the way he did it. The coldness of it, the efficiency, it earned him a reputation. They started calling him Heartless within a week. At first, it was an insult. A condemnation. But he wore it like armor. Let it become his identity. Let everyone believe he was incapable of feeling anything. Because a king who's feared is a king who's obeyed. And obedience meant stability. Peace. An end to the wars. She leaned forward, her voice dropping. But here's what most people don't know. After he killed his father, after the court had dispersed and everyone had gone back to their territories, he disappeared for 3 days. Just vanished. And when he came back, his eyes were red. Not from wolf shift. From crying. From grief. Because whatever else his father was, he was still his father. And killing him destroyed something in Damien that I don't think ever healed. The image formed in Aria's mind unbidden. Damien, younger, standing over his father's body, blood on his hands. And then alone somewhere, breaking apart where no one could see, grieving in private, keeping his pain locked away because showing weakness would undermine everything he'd just done, everything he'd sacrificed. He's not heartless, Aria said softly. He's just buried his heart so deep that no one can reach it. Exactly. Talia smiled, and there was approval in it. Understanding. Which is why I think you might be important. Because I've watched him these past 14 months. Watched him become obsessed with finding you. Watched him track every lead, investigate every rumor, put more resources into locating one runaway wolf than most kings would put into fighting a war. And I've seen the way he looks at you. Like you're the first real thing he's encountered in years. Like you matter in a way nothing else has mattered. Aria's throat was tight. I don't want that kind of responsibility. I can't be someone's salvation. I can barely save myself. Maybe that's exactly why it works. Talia stood, moving to the window, looking down at the training wolves below. You're not trying to use him. You're not angling for power or position. You're just trying to survive. And maybe that honesty, that raw desperation to live, maybe that's what he needs. Someone who isn't playing games. Someone who's just as broken as he is. Broken. The word echoed in Aria's mind, settling into all the cracked and damaged places inside her. Was that what she was? Broken? She'd never thought of it that way. She'd always just thought of herself as cursed. As wrong. As something that didn't fit anywhere, didn't belong anywhere, didn't deserve anywhere. The mark on her shoulder blade began to burn again. Not pain exactly. More like awareness. Like the power inside her was listening to her thoughts, responding to her emotions, reminding her that it was there. Always there. Waiting. I need to tell you something, Aria said, the words coming out before she could stop them. Before she could think better of it. About what I am. About how this started. Talia turned from the window, her expression attentive. I'm listening. Aria took a breath. Let it out. And for the first time in over a year, she let herself remember. Really remember. Not the sanitized version she told herself to make it bearable. But the truth. The horrible, terrifying, life-destroying truth. I was 17. Almost 18. Living with my pack in the Silver Moon territory. My father was alpha. Strong. Respected. Traditional. He believed in the old ways. In pack loyalty above everything. In keeping bloodlines pure. In maintaining order through strict rules and clear hierarchies. Her hands curled into fists on her lap. I was his only child. His heir. Everything I did was watched. Judged. Measured against impossible standards. But I tried. I tried so hard to be what he needed. What the pack needed. The memories came faster now, sharper, cutting like glass. My first shift was supposed to be during the Harvest Moon ceremony. In front of the entire pack. A celebration. A rite of passage. Every young wolf goes through it. It's normal. Expected. I wasn't nervous. I'd been preparing for years. Knew what to do. Knew what would happen. She could see it so clearly. The clearing. The moonlight. The circle of wolves watching. Her father standing at the center, pride in his eyes, waiting for his daughter to shift for the first time. To prove she was strong. Worthy. Capable of leading one day. But when I shifted, something went wrong. I could feel it immediately. The change didn't feel right. It was too hot. Too bright. Like fire was running through my veins instead of blood. And when the shift completed, I wasn't normal. Talia had gone very still. What did you become? Silver. Aria's voice dropped to a whisper. My wolf form was silver. Not gray or white or any of the normal colors. Silver. Like liquid moonlight. Like metal. And when I moved, flames followed. Silver flames that didn't burn but definitely existed. That rippled across my fur like I was made of fire and magic and something ancient. She could still remember the silence. The horrible, crushing silence that had fallen over the clearing. Everyone staring. No one speaking. Just shock and fear written across every face. And then someone screamed. One of the elders. She pointed at me and screamed that I was cursed. That silver wolves were omens of disaster. That the flames meant death and destruction. That I would bring ruin to the pack. Aria's nails dug deeper into her palms. And my father just stood there, looking at me like I was a stranger. Like I was something disgusting. Something shameful. Something wrong. The next part was harder. The part that still woke her up at night, gasping, tears streaming down her face. I shifted back. Immediately. Desperate to fix it, to make it go away, to prove I was normal. But when I shifted back, there was a mark on my shoulder. A silver crescent moon. Glowing. Burning. And everyone could see it. Everyone knew something had changed inside me. Something permanent. Talia's voice was gentle when she spoke. What did they do? They called a council. Debated for 3 days what to do with me. Some wanted me killed. Said I was too dangerous to live. Others wanted me locked away, studied, controlled. And a few, just a few, wanted to understand what it meant. Wanted to explore whether this was a gift instead of a curse. She laughed, bitter and harsh. My father voted to exile me. His own daughter. He stood in front of the council and said I was no longer his blood. No longer pack. That I had to leave before I brought whatever curse I carried down on all of them. The pain of it was still fresh. Still raw. Like it had happened yesterday instead of over a year ago. They gave me 1 hour to gather my things. My mother cried, but didn't fight for me. My friends wouldn't look at me. The pack I'd grown up with, the wolves I'd known my entire life, they just watched as I was escorted to the border and told never to come back. Told that if I ever set foot in Silvermoon territory again, I'd be killed on sight. She was shaking now. Couldn't stop shaking. The memories were too much, too overwhelming, dragging her back to that moment of absolute abandonment. Of having everything she'd ever known stripped away because of something she couldn't control. Something she didn't understand. I tried to fix it, she continued, the words spilling out like a confession. I went to a witch in a border town. Paid her everything I had to remove the mark. To make me normal again. She said she could do it. Said she'd done it before with other cursed wolves. But when she tried, the pain of that memory was physical. Sharp enough to make her gasp even now. It nearly killed me. The magic she used tried to rip the mark out of my skin, but it was too deep. Too much a part of me. I was burning from the inside out, screaming, begging her to stop. And when she finally did, when she gave up, the mark was still there. Brighter than before. Angrier. Like I'd insulted it by trying to remove it. Talia moved closer, kneeling in front of her chair, her hands covering Aria's trembling ones. You survived that. You survived being rejected by your pack, being tortured by a witch, being hunted for over a year. You're stronger than you think. I'm not strong. Aria's voice cracked. I'm just too stubborn to die. There's a difference. No. There isn't. Talia's grip tightened. Surviving when everything is trying to kill you, when you have every reason to give up, that's the definition of strength. That's what warriors are made of. Not people who never face hardship. People who face it and keep going anyway. Aria wanted to believe her. Wanted to accept those words and let them heal something inside her. But the weight of the past year was too heavy. The memory of her father's face too clear. The shame too deeply rooted. I haven't shifted since that night, she admitted. I'm too afraid. Afraid of what I'll become. Afraid of what the power will do if I let it out. Afraid that everyone was right and I am cursed and dangerous and wrong. She looked up at Talia, letting the guards see the fear in her eyes. What if they're right? What if I am going to destroy everything? What if the prophecy isn't about salvation but about the end of everything? Then we'll face it together. The voice came from the doorway. Deep. Certain. Familiar. Aria's head snapped up. Damien was standing there, leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed over his chest. How long had he been there? How much had he heard? His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes. Something fierce and protective and absolutely certain. He pushed off from the doorframe and walked into the room, his presence filling the space, commanding attention without trying. I told you I had a council meeting. I lied. I was outside the door, listening. He didn't apologize for it. Didn't seem to think he needed to. And I heard everything. Your story. Your pain. Your fear. He stopped in front of her, and she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You want to know if you're cursed? If you're dangerous? If you're going to destroy everything? His voice dropped lower, more intense. Maybe you are. Maybe the prophecies are right and you carry enough power to burn the world down. But I'll tell you what I see when I look at you. He crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level, close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, could feel the heat radiating off his body. I see someone who's been beaten down by people who were supposed to protect her. I see someone who's been told she's wrong so many times she started to believe it. I see someone who's been carrying a burden alone that would have broken most wolves years ago. But you're still here. Still fighting. Still trying to find a way to survive even when survival seems impossible. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he touched her face, his palm warm against her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. You're not cursed, Aria. You're powerful. And power always scares people. Always makes them react with fear instead of understanding. Your father was a coward. Your pack was weak. They couldn't handle what you were becoming, so they threw you away rather than face their own inadequacy. The words settled into her chest, warm and solid and dangerous. Because she wanted to believe them so badly it hurt. Wanted to believe she wasn't broken or wrong or cursed. That she was just powerful and misunderstood and deserving of protection instead of exile. How can you be so sure? She whispered. Because I know what it's like to be feared. His eyes held hers, and she saw the truth in them. The pain. The isolation. The terrible weight of being someone everyone was afraid to get close to. I know what it's like to have people look at you and see a monster instead of a person. To have your strength used as an excuse to push you away instead of a reason to stand beside you. His thumb traced along her cheekbone. We're the same, you and I. Two people who've been told we're too dangerous to love. Too powerful to trust. Too different to belong anywhere. But you have a kingdom, Aria said. You have wolves who follow you. You're not alone. I have wolves who obey me out of fear. Who follow orders because disobeying means death. Who treat me with respect because I'm their king, not because they actually care whether I live or die. His expression didn't change, but something in his voice did. Something vulnerable. Something true. I've been alone for 5 years, Aria. Surrounded by people, but completely, utterly alone. Until I found you. The air between them felt charged. Electric. Like standing too close to lightning. Aria's heart was racing, her breath coming too fast, her body responding to his proximity in ways she didn't understand and couldn't control. This was dangerous. This connection. This pull. This feeling like she was standing on the edge of something that would change everything if she let herself fall. I don't know how to be what you need, she said honestly. I don't know how to control this power. I don't know how to fulfill some ancient prophecy. I don't even know how to be a normal wolf anymore. Then we'll figure it out together. Damien's voice was steady. Certain. Like he'd already decided and nothing would change his mind. I'll help you learn to control your power. I'll help you understand what the prophecy means. I'll help you become whoever you're meant to be. And in return, you'll do something for me. There it was. The price. The expectation. Aria steeled herself. What? Stop running from yourself. His hand dropped from her face, but his eyes never left hers. Stop believing you're wrong or cursed or dangerous in a bad way. Stop letting other people's fear define who you are. Be who you actually are. Without apology. Without shame. Without hiding. He stood, backing away slightly, giving her space. That's all I ask. Be yourself. Fully. Completely. And let me protect you while you figure out what that means. It sounded so simple. So impossible. So terrifying and liberating at the same time. Be herself. After a year of pretending to be nobody. After 17 years of trying to be perfect. After a lifetime of molding herself to fit other people's expectations. Just be herself. I don't know if I can, she admitted. You can. Talia's voice was firm. You already are. Right now. Being honest. Being vulnerable. Being real. That's you. That's who you are underneath all the fear and pain. Damien nodded. She's right. And that woman. The one who stole bread but left coins, who worked herself to exhaustion to prove her worth, who ran for 14 months because she was too strong to give up, that woman is exactly who this realm needs. That woman is who the prophecy speaks of. Not some perfect savior. Not some all-powerful deity. Just a girl who refuses to break even when breaking would be easier. The words wrapped around her like a shield. Like armor. Like permission to be flawed and powerful at the same time. To be scared and brave. To be uncertain and still move forward. Aria took a shaky breath. Let it out. And made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff with no idea if she'd fall or fly. Okay. The word was barely audible. Okay. I'll try. I'll stop running. I'll stay here. I'll figure out what I am. What this mark means. What the prophecy wants from me. She looked up at Damien, at the king who'd hunted her and saved her, and looked at her like she mattered more than kingdoms. But if I stay, if I do this, you have to promise me something. Name it. If I become something terrible. If the power takes over and I become the destruction the prophecy warns about, you have to stop me. Whatever it takes. You have to be strong enough to do what needs to be done. Her voice was steady now. Determined. Promise me that you won't let me hurt innocent people. That you'll end it before it gets that far. Damien's expression went cold. Hard. The mask of the Heartless King sliding back into place. No. What? I said no. He moved closer again, towering over her, his presence overwhelming. I won't promise to kill you. I won't promise to give up on you. I won't promise to see you as a threat instead of someone worth saving. That's not how this works. That's not what protection means. But if then I'll find another way. His voice was absolute. Final. I'll find a way to control it. To channel it. To help you master it instead of being mastered by it. But I will not give up on you before we've even tried. I will not look at you and see an enemy. I will not be another person who throws you away because they're afraid. The intensity of it, the sheer force of his conviction, stole her breath. He meant it. Every word. He would fight for her. Protect her. Refuse to see her as anything less than worth saving. Even if it meant standing against the entire realm. Even if it cost him everything. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why do you care so much? You don't even know me. Not really. Damien was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. More vulnerable than she'd heard it yet. Because when I look at you, I see the first person in 5 years who isn't afraid to let me see them break. Who doesn't pretend to be strong all the time. Who admits they're scared and tired and don't have all the answers. His eyes were dark, intense, burning with something she couldn't name. You're real, Aria. In a world full of people playing roles and wearing masks and pretending to be something they're not, you're just real. And I've been searching for something real for so long I'd almost forgotten it existed. The confession hung between them, raw and honest and dangerous. Because this wasn't just about prophecies or power or political strategy. This was personal. This was two broken people recognizing each other across the void. Seeing in each other the reflection of their own pain, their own isolation, their own desperate need to be seen and accepted despite everything that made them dangerous. Aria didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to respond to that level of honesty. So she just nodded. Once. A silent acknowledgement. An acceptance of whatever this was between them. Damien straightened, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Get some rest. Build your strength back. Tomorrow, we'll start training. We'll figure out what your power can do. What you're capable of. And we'll do it safely. Carefully. With people who understand magic and prophecy and ancient bloodlines. He turned toward the door. But tonight you rest. You eat. You let yourself believe, just for a few hours, that you're safe. That you're protected. That you matter. He paused at the threshold, looking back at her one more time. Welcome home, Aria. Even if you don't realize that's what this is yet. Then he was gone, leaving her alone with Talia and the weight of everything that had just been said. Everything that had just been promised. Everything that had just changed. Talia squeezed her hands once more before standing. He's right, you know. About all of it. You do matter. And this is home. Even if it takes you a while to believe it. Aria looked around the sitting room. At the food. At the comfortable furniture. At the windows that showed a courtyard where wolves trained together instead of fighting each other. At the evidence of stability and safety and something resembling peace. Maybe this could be home. Maybe she could stop running. Maybe she could finally let herself rest. Or maybe this was just the eye of the storm. The quiet before everything fell apart. The moment of hope before the prophecy came true and her power destroyed everything she was starting to care about. Only time would tell. And the mark on her shoulder blade, still warm, still burning, still waiting, that mark seemed to pulse with anticipation. Like it knew. Like it had been waiting for this moment. For her to stop running. For her to finally face what she was. For better or worse, her destiny was in motion. And there was no turning back now. 3 days passed in a strange, dreamlike suspension of reality. Aria ate. She slept. She wore clothes that fit and didn't have holes. She walked through corridors of the fortress with Talia at her side, learning the layout, nodding to wolves who stared at her with everything from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. She existed in a space between captivity and freedom, between fear and something that might have been the beginning of trust. But she didn't see Damien. He was busy, Talia explained. Council meetings that stretched late into the night. Border disputes that required his attention. Representatives from outer territories demanding audiences. The work of holding a realm together through will and strategy, and the kind of constant vigilance that never allowed for rest. Aria told herself she wasn't disappointed. Told herself it was better this way. That she needed space to think, to process, to figure out what she was doing here without his overwhelming presence, making everything more complicated. But every time footsteps echoed in the corridor outside her room, her heart would jump. Every time a door opened, she'd look up expecting to see him. He never came. Until the 4th morning, when she woke to find a note slipped under her door. Heavy paper. Elegant script. Just 4 words. Meet me at dawn, asterisk. No signature. No explanation. But she knew who it was from. Knew what it meant. The training he'd promised. The answers he'd said would come. The beginning of whatever came next. She dressed quickly in the practical clothes she'd found in the wardrobe, leather pants, a simple tunic, boots that actually fit. Her hair she pulled back into a braid, keeping it out of her face. The mark on her shoulder blade was warm again, humming with that now familiar awareness, like it knew something was coming. Talia was waiting outside her door, already awake, already dressed. He sent for you. How did you? I know him. Know his patterns. Talia's expression was unreadable. Come on. We don't want to keep him waiting. They walked through the fortress in the pre-dawn darkness, down corridors Aria hadn't seen before, deeper into the complex, away from the living quarters and training yards. The air grew cooler, damper, carrying a mineral scent that spoke of deep earth and ancient stone. They were going underground. The passage opened into a massive chamber that stole Aria's breath. It was a cavern. Natural, not built. The ceiling disappeared into darkness high above, and the walls were raw stone marked with veins of something that glimmered in the torchlight, silver and gold and colors she didn't have names for. But it was the center of the chamber that drew her attention. Drew every part of her awareness until nothing else existed. An altar. Carved from a single piece of black stone, smooth and polished, etched with symbols that seemed to move in the flickering light. Around it, a perfect circle had been cut into the floor, filled with more symbols, more markings, a language Aria had never seen but somehow felt she should understand. And standing at the edge of that circle, his back to them, was Damien. He turned as they approached, and something in Aria's chest clenched. He looked tired. More tired than she'd seen him before. There were shadows under his eyes, tension in his shoulders, a weariness that spoke of too many nights without sleep and too many burdens carried alone. But when his eyes found hers, something in his expression shifted. Softened. Like seeing her ease something in him. "You came," he said, and there was relief in his voice. Like he'd been afraid she wouldn't. "You summoned me." Aria stopped at the edge of the circle, instinctively aware that crossing that line meant something. Meant commitment. Meant stepping into whatever this was without reservation. "What is this place?" "The heart of the realm." Damien's voice echoed strangely in the vast space, taking on a resonance that raised the hair on her arms. "The oldest sacred site in our territory. Carved by the first wolves, blessed by the first magic. Every Lycan King has been crowned here. Every major oath has been sworn here. Every prophecy that matters was recorded here." He gestured to the walls, and Aria realized what she'd thought were random veins of color were actually more symbols. More writing. Covering every surface, spiraling up into the darkness, telling stories in a language that predated words. "This is where I need you to be," Damien continued. "Where your power can manifest safely. Where the magic that lives in your blood can respond to the magic that lives in the stone." He held out his hand to her across the circle. "Will you trust me?" Such a simple question. Such an impossible question. Trust. The thing she'd learned not to give. The thing that had been broken in her so thoroughly she wasn't sure it could ever be repaired. But standing here in this ancient place, looking at a man who'd hunted her and saved her and promised to protect her, she found herself wanting to try. She took his hand. The moment her fingers touched his, the mark on her shoulder blade exploded with heat. Not pain. Power. Pure, undiluted power that raced through her veins like liquid silver, like fire, like something alive and aware and finally free. She gasped, tried to pull back, but Damien's grip tightened. "Don't fight it," he said, his voice calm, steady, anchoring her. "Let it come. Let it show you what it is." The symbols on the floor began to glow. Soft at first, then brighter, filling the circle with light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The altar at the center pulsed in response, beating like a heart, and Aria realized with a shock that she could feel it. Could feel the heartbeat of this place, of this ancient power, syncing with her own pulse, her own breath, her own terrified, exhilarated existence. Damien led her forward, into the circle, and the moment both her feet crossed the threshold, the world changed. The cavern disappeared. Or rather, it was still there, but overlaid with something else. Something older. Visions. Memories. History bleeding through the present like watercolors running together. She saw wolves, massive, ancient, more powerful than any she'd ever seen, standing in this very circle. She saw them shift under moonlight, their forms blazing with power, with purpose. She saw magic being woven into the stone, binding something, creating something, establishing something that would last through ages. And she saw her. A woman. Silver-haired. Silver-eyed. Marked with a crescent moon on her shoulder. Standing at this altar. Holding flames in her palms that didn't burn but illuminated everything, made everything clear, showed truth in a world of shadows. The first flame. Damien's voice came from beside her, steady and sure. The original bearer of the mark. The one the prophecies speak of. The one who united the packs not through force, but through truth. Through showing them what they could become if they stopped fighting each other and started building something together. The vision shifted. The woman was older now, standing before an army, not of wolves but of darkness. Shadow beasts. Creatures made of malice and hunger, and the kind of evil that consumed everything in its path. She raised her hands, and silver fire poured from her palms, from her eyes, from the mark on her shoulder. A wall of flame that held back the darkness, that protected everything behind her, that burned not with heat, but with pure, concentrated will. "She saved them," Aria whispered, tears streaming down her face without her permission, without her understanding why. She saved everyone. And then she vanished. Damien's hand was still holding hers, keeping her grounded. The darkness was pushed back. The realm was safe. But the first flame disappeared. Some say she died. Others say she ascended. Became something more than wolf, more than mortal. But before she left, she made a promise. The vision changed again. The woman standing in the circle, her hand pressed to the altar, magic pouring from her into the stone. And words. Ancient words that echoed through time, through space, through Aria's very bones. When the darkness rises again, when the old evil wakes, when the realm stands on the edge of annihilation, I will return. Not in body, but in blood, in power, in the mark I leave behind. One will come. One who carries my flame. One who will face the choice I faced. Burn the world to save it, or let the world burn to save themselves. Asterisk. The vision faded. The cavern solidified around them. Aria was shaking, her legs barely holding her up, her mind reeling from what she'd seen, what she'd felt, what she'd understood on a level deeper than conscious thought. That's the prophecy, she said, her voice hoarse. That's what everyone's afraid of. I'm not just marked. I'm her. I'm the first flame reborn. Or her power reborn. Or, she couldn't finish. Couldn't process it. You're her heir. Damien turned her to face him, both hands on her shoulders now, his eyes intense and serious. The power that lived in her blood lives in yours. The magic she wielded is the magic you carry. The choice she faced is the choice you'll face. That's what the mark means. That's why everyone's been searching for you. Why some want to protect you and others want you dead. Aria's mind was spinning. But I don't know how to use that kind of power. I don't know how to fight darkness, or save the realm, or make impossible choices. I can barely control a single flame without panicking. Which is why you're here. A new voice echoed through the cavern. Old. Female. Carrying an authority that made even Damien straighten slightly. Aria turned to see a woman emerging from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. Ancient. That was the only word for her. Not just old but ancient, like she'd been alive for centuries, like time moved differently around her. Her hair was white, her skin lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and bright, and seeing things Aria couldn't imagine. Who? This is Ceres, Damien said quietly. The Keeper. She's been maintaining this place, studying these prophecies, waiting for the marked one to appear for longer than I've been alive. Ceres moved closer, her steps sure despite her apparent age, her gaze locked on Aria with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. When she reached the circle, she didn't ask permission. Just stepped inside, approached Aria, and reached out to touch the shoulder where the mark lived beneath fabric and skin. The moment her fingers made contact, Aria's vision went white. She was standing in a forest. But not any forest she knew. The trees were massive, ancient, their trunks wider than houses. The sky above was wrong, too many moons, too many stars, arranged in patterns that made her head hurt. And in front of her, standing in a clearing, was the silver-haired woman from the vision. The first flame turned to look at her, and Aria's breath stopped. Because those eyes, those silver, ancient, impossibly wise eyes, were looking at her with recognition. With understanding. With something that might have been love. You came. The woman's voice was warm, welcoming. I've been waiting. Calling. Hoping you'd be strong enough to hear me. I don't understand. Aria's voice shook. What is this? Where am I? Between. Between past and present. Between what was and what will be. Between the memory of my magic and the reality of yours. The first flame smiled, and it was both sad and hopeful. I left a piece of myself behind. Woven into the mark. Into the bloodline. Into every daughter who would carry my power forward through generations. You're the seventh. The last. The one who will face what I faced and make the choice I couldn't. What choice? But Aria already knew. Already felt it in her bones. You chose to save the realm. You chose to burn back the darkness. I chose to sacrifice everything. The first flame's expression grew serious. My life. My love. My future. Everything I wanted for myself I gave up to save others. And I've wondered, through all the years of waiting, if I made the right choice. If the cost was worth it. If there was another way I was too afraid or too limited to see. She stepped closer, and Aria could see the mark on her shoulder, the same crescent moon, but blazing so bright it was almost painful to look at. You're stronger than I was. You've survived more. Suffered more. Been broken and rebuilt more times than I can count. And, because of that, you might be able to do what I couldn't. You might be able to save the realm without destroying yourself in the process. Or I might fail completely. Aria's voice was barely a whisper. I might be the destruction. I might be the thing that brings the darkness instead of stopping it. That's the risk. That's always the risk. The first flame reached out and touched Aria's face, and her hand was warm, solid, real. But I'll tell you what I learned, what I wish I'd understood before I made my choice. Power doesn't make you evil. Fear of power makes you dangerous. If you embrace what you are, if you learn to use the flame without shame or terror, you might just become something neither savior nor destroyer. You might become something new. Something the prophecy didn't account for. The forest was starting to fade. The vision dissolving. Aria grabbed the woman's hand, desperate to hold on, desperate for more answers. How do I control it? How do I use it without losing myself? The first flame's smile was enigmatic. Ancient. Knowing. You find something worth protecting more than you fear the power. You find someone who sees you as more than a weapon. You find a reason to burn that isn't about destruction, but about creation. About building instead of tearing down. Her eyes flicked over Aria's shoulder, like she could see through the vision to where Damien stood in the real world. And I think you've already found it, even if you don't realize it yet. Then she was gone, and Aria was back in the cavern, gasping, stumbling backward. Damien caught her before she could fall, his arms strong and steady around her, holding her up while the world spun and her mind struggled to process what had just happened. What did you see? Ceres's voice was urgent. Excited. What did she show you? Aria couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. She just turned her face into Damien's chest, letting his solidity anchor her, letting his warmth remind her that she was real, that she was here, that she hadn't disappeared into the vision completely. She saw the first flame, Damien said quietly, his arms tightening around Aria protectively. Didn't she? Yes. Ceres's voice was filled with wonder. The magic accepted her, recognized her, showed her what she needed to see. This is it. This is what we've been waiting for. The heir has returned. The prophecy is in motion. And the darkness, she paused, and something in her tone made Aria's blood run cold. The darkness is already stirring. I've felt it. Seen signs in the outer territories. Shadow beasts crossing borders. Old evils waking. We have less time than I thought. Less time than the prophecy suggested. Damien's body went rigid. How much time? Months. Maybe weeks? The convergence is coming. The moment when the realms grow thin, when the barriers between worlds weaken. That's when the darkness will strike. That's when she'll need to be ready. Ceres looked at Aria with a mixture of compassion and urgency. Can you do it, child? Can you learn to master your flame before the darkness comes for everything you care about? Aria pulled back from Damien, forcing herself to stand on her own, forcing herself to meet the old woman's eyes. She was terrified, overwhelmed. Still processing visions and prophecies and the weight of an impossible destiny. But underneath the fear, something else was growing. Something that felt like determination. Like purpose. Like the beginning of acceptance. I don't know, she said honestly. But I'll try. I'll train. I'll learn. I'll do whatever it takes to be ready. Good. Ceres smiled, and it transformed her ancient face, made her look younger, more alive. Then we begin tomorrow. At dawn. Every day until you can call your flame without fear, until you can shape it without hesitation, until you understand that you're not cursed or dangerous or wrong, you're just powerful. And power, properly wielded, can protect instead of destroy. She turned to leave, then paused, looking back at them. And Damien? Stay close to her. The bond forming between you, it's not an accident. It's part of the magic. Part of the prophecy. The first flame had a mate. Someone who grounded her. Kept her human when the power threatened to consume her. You might serve the same purpose. If you're brave enough to let yourself care about someone more than you care about your reputation. Then she was gone, disappearing into the shadows, leaving them alone in the sacred chamber with nothing but the glow of the symbols and the echo of ancient promises. Aria looked up at Damien, seeing him clearly in the strange light. Seeing the man behind the king. The person behind the reputation. The heart behind the heartless exterior. She said there's a bond between us. A mate bond. Is that true? Damien's expression was guarded, but his eyes were open, vulnerable, showing her things he probably didn't show anyone else. I don't know. Maybe. I've never felt anything like this before. Never wanted to protect someone the way I want to protect you. Never felt like someone's survival mattered more than my own. He reached out slowly, giving her time to move away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Does it scare you? The possibility. She thought about it. Really thought about it. A mate bond with the Lycan King. With someone powerful and dangerous and carrying his own darkness. With someone who'd killed his own father and ruled through fear and built his entire life around being untouchable. It should terrify her. Should send her running in the opposite direction. But all she felt was a strange, settling sense of rightness. Like pieces clicking into place. Like finding something she'd been searching for without knowing it. No, she said softly. It doesn't scare me. Which probably means I'm insane. Or too tired to think straight. Or both. Damien's lips curved into something that might have been the beginning of a smile. A real smile. Not the cold, controlled expression he showed the world, but something genuine. Something just for her. Or maybe you're finally starting to trust yourself. Trust your instincts. Trust that not everything is a threat or a trap. He stepped back, putting distance between them, and the loss of his proximity felt like cold water. Come on. I'll walk you back. You need to rest before training tomorrow. Ceres doesn't go easy on her students. You'll need your strength. They walked through the fortress in comfortable silence, Talia trailing behind at a respectful distance. The sun was rising now, painting the stone walls in shades of gold and rose, turning the fortress into something almost beautiful. Wolves were starting to stir, beginning their day, and some of them stopped to stare as their king walked past with the silver-marked girl at his side. Aria didn't miss the looks. Didn't miss the whispers. Didn't miss the way some wolves looked at her with naked hostility and others with something that might have been hope. She was going to have to navigate this. Navigate being marked. Being powerful. Being tied to prophecies and destinies and ancient magic. But for the first time since that horrible night in the clearing when her world had fallen apart, she didn't feel alone. She felt seen. Protected. Part of something bigger than her own survival. When they reached her door, Damien paused. Aria, what you saw in the vision. What the first flame told you. Do you believe it? Do you believe you can be something other than savior or destroyer? She thought about the woman's words. About finding something worth protecting. About embracing power without fear. About becoming something new. I want to believe it. I want to be more than what the prophecy expects. More than what everyone fears. But I don't know if I'm strong enough. You are. He said it with absolute certainty. Like it was already fact. Already decided. You're stronger than you know. And I'm going to help you see that. We both are. Me and Ceres and everyone who understands that you're not here to destroy us. You're here to save us. Even if you don't believe that yet. He turned to leave, then stopped. Looked back at her one more time. Get some rest, Silver Flame. Tomorrow, your rail training begins. Tomorrow, you stop running from your power and start learning to wield it. And I promise you, by the time the darkness comes, you'll be ready to face it. We'll be ready to face it. Together. Then he was gone, striding down the corridor with Talia following, leaving Aria standing in her doorway with her heart pounding and her mind racing and the mark on her shoulder burning with something that felt like anticipation. The prophecy was in motion. The darkness was coming. And somehow, impossibly, she was supposed to be the one to stop it. But as she closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the solid wood at her back and the warmth of the fortress around her, she realized something important. Something that changed everything. She wasn't facing it alone anymore. She had allies. She had protection. She had a king who looked at her like she mattered more than kingdoms, and an ancient keeper who saw her potential instead of her curse, and a guard who'd become something like a friend. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that would be enough to tip the scales. Maybe love and loyalty and connection were stronger than prophecy and darkness and destiny. Or maybe she was about to fail spectacularly and destroy everything she was starting to care about. Only time would tell. But the mark on her shoulder, that silver crescent moon that had defined her entire existence for over a year, that mark pulsed with warmth, with power, with possibility. And for the first time since it had appeared, Aria didn't try to suppress it, didn't try to hide it. She just let it be, let it exist. Let it remind her that she was marked for a reason, chosen for a purpose, destined for something that would either save the realm or destroy it. She just had to figure out which. And she had to figure it out fast. Because the darkness was coming. The convergence was approaching. And ready or not, her destiny was about to find her. The only question was whether she'd be strong enough to meet it. Or whether the prophecy would consume her just like it had consumed the first flame centuries ago. If you're still with me, if your heart is racing and you need to know what happens when Aria faces her first real test, then subscribe to Shayla's Romance Library. Because this story is just getting started. And the fire? The fire is about to burn brighter than you can imagine. Asterisk, asterisk. The training began at dawn, just as Ceres had promised. For 3 weeks, Aria descended into that ancient cavern every morning while the fortress still slept. 3 weeks of learning to summon her flame without fear, to shape it without hesitation, to understand that the power living in her blood wasn't a curse to be suppressed, but a force to be mastered. Ceres was relentless, patient but demanding, pushing Aria past exhaustion, past doubt, past every wall she'd built around herself for protection. And slowly, impossibly, it started to work. The silver fire came easier now. Responded to her will instead of her panic. She could call it with a thought, shape it with intention, send it dancing across her palms like living light. She could feel the ancient magic woven into the cavern walls responding to her, recognizing her, welcoming her home. And every time the power surged through her veins, she felt less like something broken and more like something powerful. Something that had been sleeping and was finally waking up. Damien came to watch sometimes, never interfering, never commenting, just standing at the edge of the circle, his dark eyes tracking every movement, every flicker of flame, every moment when she pushed past her limits and discovered she was capable of more than she'd ever imagined. His presence should have made her nervous, should have made her self-conscious, but instead, it grounded her, steadied her. Like knowing he was there, watching, believing in her capacity to succeed, made the impossible feel achievable. They didn't talk much during those weeks. He was busy with the endless demands of ruling. She was exhausted from training. But there were moments, small moments, passing each other in corridors and feeling that pull, that connection, that inexplicable sense of recognition. Sharing meals in the great hall where he sat at the head table and she sat with Talia, but their eyes would find each other across the crowd, holding for just a second too long before looking away. Walking through the fortress gardens at dusk when the training was done and the day's work was finished, moving in parallel paths that never quite intersected but were always aware of each other's proximity. It was torture. Sweet, aching, impossible torture. Because the mate bond, if that's what this was growing stronger, more insistent, more undeniable. Aria could feel it in her bones, in her blood, in the way her body responded when he was near. The way her pulse kicked up. The way her skin felt too tight. The way every instinct she had screamed to close the distance between them, to touch him, to let herself fall into whatever this connection promised. But she held back. Because accepting the bond meant accepting everything that came with it. Meant tying herself to a king who ruled through fear. Meant becoming part of a world that still looked at her with suspicion and hostility. Meant risking her heart on someone who'd spent 5 years being called Heartless for very good reasons. And then the council meeting happened. Aria hadn't planned to attend. Wasn't invited. Wasn't even supposed to know it was happening. But Talia mentioned it in passing. A gathering of the major alphas from every territory, representatives from the outer packs, advisors and elders, and everyone who held power in the realm. They were coming to discuss border disputes and trade agreements and the usual political maneuvering that kept the peace. But what Talia didn't say, what Aria could hear in the careful way she phrased things, was that they were also coming to discuss her. The marked one. The girl carrying ancient power. The threat or weapon or whatever they'd decided she was in the 3 weeks since word had spread that the Lycan King was harboring her in his fortress. You should stay in your rooms, Talia said that morning, her expression tight with worry. Let Damien handle this. He knows how to manage the alphas. Knows how to keep them in line. But Aria was tired of hiding. Tired of letting other people decide her fate while she cowered in the shadows. If they were going to talk about her, judge her, make decisions that would affect her entire existence, she wanted to be there. Wanted to face them. Wanted to prove she wasn't some helpless girl who needed to be managed or controlled or protected from reality. So when the sun reached its peak and the council gathered in the great hall, Aria slipped in through a side entrance. Stayed in the shadows along the back wall where the torchlight didn't quite reach. Where she could see and hear everything without being immediately noticed. The great hall was massive. Vaulted ceilings supported by columns carved with wolf imagery, long tables arranged in a horseshoe shape with Damien's throne positioned at the head. Banners hung from the walls representing every major territory, silver and black for the northern packs, red and gold for the eastern territories, green and bronze for the southern forests, blue and white for the western mountains. And filling the space between those banners were wolves. Dozens of them. Alphas radiating power and dominance. Advisors whispering strategies. Guards standing at attention with weapons visible and ready. This was the realm. This was the power structure Damien had built and maintained through sheer force of will. And standing at the center of it, sitting on that throne with perfect posture and an expression of absolute control, was the king himself. He looked different here. Colder. More remote. The mask was fully in place, the heartless king who showed no weakness, no emotion, no hint of the man who'd held her while she broke apart or watched her train with something like pride in his eyes. This was the version of him the world saw. The version that kept the peace through fear and authority and the unspoken threat of what would happen to anyone who challenged his rule. The meeting began with the usual formalities. Reports from each territory. Discussions about harvest yields and trade routes and minor disputes that needed mediation. Aria listened with half her attention, watching the dynamics, seeing how the alphas interacted with Damien. Some with respect bordering on reverence. Others with barely concealed resentment. And a few with calculation in their eyes, like they were constantly measuring him, looking for weaknesses, waiting for the moment when his control might slip. And then, inevitably, someone brought her up. My king. The voice came from one of the eastern alphas, a wolf named Corvin with silver streaking his dark hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen too much violence. We must address the elephant in the room. The marked one. The girl you've been hiding in your fortress for weeks now. The temperature in the hall seemed to drop. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward Damien, waiting to see how he'd respond. Aria's heart hammered against her ribs, her breath coming faster, but she forced herself to stay still. To stay hidden. To see how this played out before revealing herself. Damien's expression didn't change. I'm not hiding anyone, Alpha Corvin. Aria is under my protection. There's a difference. Protection from what? Another voice. A female alpha from the southern territories named Mira, young and ambitious with fire in her eyes. From justice? From the consequences of carrying cursed power? From the fear every pack feels knowing there's a silver flame living among us. Cursed. Damien's voice was quiet, but sharp enough to cut. Interesting choice of words. Tell me, Alpha Mira, what makes her cursed? The fact that she carries ancient power? The fact that she's tied to prophecy? Or the fact that you're afraid of something you don't understand? Mira's jaw tightened. The prophecies speak of destruction. of fire that consumes, of a choice between salvation and annihilation. Forgive me if that inspires fear rather than welcome. The prophecies also speak of protection. A new voice. Older. Carrying weight. Aria recognized him from the banners Stellan, Alpha of the Western Mountains, one of the few who'd supported Damien's rise to power 5 years ago. They speak of a guardian. Of power that holds back darkness. Why are we so quick to believe the worst interpretation? Because the worst is what kills us. Corvin leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. My king, with all due respect, you're taking an enormous risk. We don't know what she's capable of. We don't know if she can control her power. We don't know if keeping her here will bring protection or invite disaster. And yet you've given her sanctuary in the heart of your fortress, trained her in sacred spaces, allowed her access to ancient magic that most of us will never see. Why? What's your endgame? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Heavy with the unspoken accusation that Damien was compromised. That his judgment was clouded. That maybe the Heartless King had developed a weakness that could be exploited. Damien stood. Slowly. Deliberately. Every eye in the room tracked the movement, and Aria could feel the shift in atmosphere. The way the temperature seemed to drop further. The way every wolf's instincts started screaming danger. This was why they called him Heartless. This was the presence that had united the realm through fear. This was the power that made even the strongest alphas think twice before challenging him. My endgame, Damien said, his voice carrying through the massive hall despite not being raised, is ensuring the survival of this realm. Which requires understanding threats before they manifest. Which requires studying prophecies instead of dismissing them. Which requires protecting assets that might prove valuable when darkness comes calling. He paused, letting that sink in. And make no mistake. Darkness is coming. Saris has confirmed it. The signs are appearing. Shadow beasts crossing borders. Ancient evils stirring. The convergence approaching faster than the old texts predicted. We have weeks. Maybe months. And when that darkness arrives, we'll need every advantage we can find. And you believe she's an advantage? Myra's voice was skeptical. Or is this about something else? Something more personal? The implication was clear. The suggestion that Damien's interest in Aria wasn't strategic but emotional. That maybe the Heartless King had found something that could make him vulnerable. Something that could be used against him. Damien's eyes went cold. Glacial. The kind of cold that made wolves take instinctive steps backward even when they were sitting down. Careful, Alpha Mira. You're suggesting I'm incapable of separating personal feelings from political necessity. You're suggesting my judgment is compromised. You're suggesting I'm weak. Each word was precise. Controlled. Deadly. Would you like to test that theory? Mira paled. Looked away. The challenge died before it could fully form, crushed under the weight of Damien's absolute authority. But the damage was done. The question was out there. The doubt was planted. And Aria could see it spreading through the room like poison. Other alphas exchanging glances. Advisors whispering. The foundations of trust that held this realm together showing cracks. She needs to be tested. Corvin's voice cut through the tension. Formally. In front of the council. Let us see what she can do. Let us judge for ourselves whether she's a threat or an asset. And if she passes, if she proves she can control her power, then we'll support your decision to protect her. But if she fails, if she shows even a hint of losing control, he didn't finish. Didn't need to. Everyone knew what he was suggesting. Execution. Imprisonment. Exile. Whatever it took to eliminate a threat before it could destroy them all. Damien was quiet for a long moment. Aria could see him weighing options, calculating risks, trying to find a path forward that wouldn't fracture his carefully maintained authority while also protecting her from wolves who'd already decided she was guilty. It was an impossible position. A trap with no good escape. And that's when Aria made her decision. She stepped out of the shadows. The movement caught everyone's attention immediately. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. The entire council hall went silent as she walked forward, her footsteps echoing on stone, her heart hammering but her spine straight, her chin up, refusing to show the terror coursing through her veins. Damien's eyes found hers across the hall, and something flashed in them. Surprise. Alarm. And underneath it all, a warning. A plea. Don't do this. Don't expose yourself. Don't make yourself a target. But she ignored it. Because this was her fight. Her fate. Her destiny. And she was done letting other people decide it for her. She stopped at the center of the horseshoe, surrounded by alphas on all sides, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes assessing her, judging her, measuring her against whatever expectations or fears they carried. She kept her gaze on Damien, drawing strength from his presence even as she defied his unspoken command. You want to test me? Her voice was steady, stronger than she felt. Then test me. Right now. In front of everyone. Let's settle this. Talia appeared at the back of the hall, her face stricken, probably having just realized Aria had slipped away. She started forward, hand on her weapon, but Damien made a small gesture and she stopped. Held her position. Trusting him to handle this even though everything in her body language screamed that she wanted to intervene. Corvin stood. You're the marked one. The silver flame. I'm Aria. She finally tore her gaze from Damien to face the alpha directly. And yes, I carry the mark. I carry the power. I'm tied to the prophecy. Everything you've heard about me is probably true. Then show us. Myra's voice was sharp. Challenging. Show us this power you carry. Prove you can control it. Or prove that we're right to fear you. Aria's hands curled into fists at her sides. The mark on her shoulder blade began to burn, responding to her spike of adrenaline, her surge of anger at being put on trial by wolves who'd already judged her. She forced herself to breathe, to center, to remember everything Saris had taught her about control, about intention, about using fear as fuel instead of letting it consume her. If I do this, she said slowly, if I show you what I can do, you have to promise that you'll judge fairly. That you won't let fear decide your verdict before you've seen the truth. We promise nothing. Corvin's voice was flat. But if you refuse, if you hide your power, we'll assume the worst. We'll assume you can't control it. And we'll demand your removal from this fortress. From this realm. One way or another. It was a threat. Clear and unambiguous. Show them or be destroyed. Prove herself or be cast out. There was no middle ground. No safe option. Just the terrifying choice between exposure and annihilation. Aria looked back at Damien. Found him watching her with an expression that was carefully neutral, but eyes that were screaming. She could read the conflict in them. The desire to stop this, to shut it down, to protect her from this moment. But also the understanding that stopping it would only make things worse. That if she didn't face this now, with him present, with witnesses who could testify to what happened, she'd face it later under worse circumstances. He gave her the smallest nod. Permission. Trust. Belief that she could do this even if he hated that she had to. Aria closed her eyes. Took a breath. And let go. The power came like a flood. Silver fire erupting from her palms, from her skin, racing across her arms in patterns that looked like living metalwork. The mark on her shoulder blazed so bright it showed through her clothes, casting light that filled the entire hall, turning shadows into blazing relief, making every wolf shield their eyes from the sudden brilliance. But Aria wasn't losing control, wasn't letting the power consume her. She was shaping it, guiding it. The flames rose above her head, twisting into forms. Wolves made of silver fire, running in circles around the hall, weaving between the columns, beautiful and terrible and absolutely, perfectly controlled. Gasps echoed through the space. Someone cursed. Multiple wolves stood, hands going to weapons on instinct before realizing the flames weren't attacking, weren't burning, weren't doing anything except dancing to Aria's will. She could feel their shock. Their fear transforming into something else. Something like awe. She opened her eyes, and they were glowing. Silver like the flames. Like the mark. Like the ancient power that had finally, fully awakened inside her. She looked at Corvin first. Then at Mira. Then at every alpha and advisor and wolf who'd come here ready to condemn her. "This is what I am," she said, and her voice carried echoes of something ancient, something that predated kingdoms and territories and all their small, petty fears. "This is the power I carry. The flame that lived in the first guardian. The magic that held back darkness and saved this realm when it stood on the edge of annihilation." The silver wolves made of fire circled faster, their forms shifting, changing, becoming more complex, more beautiful, more impossible. And yes, this power could destroy. Could burn everything you've built. Could reduce your territories to ash and your carefully maintained peace to chaos. She pulled the flames back, drawing them into herself, letting them sink beneath her skin until only a soft glow remained. The mark on her shoulder still visible through her clothes, still burning, but contained. Controlled. No longer wild or dangerous or out of control. "But I won't." Her voice dropped to normal, human, vulnerable. "Because I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here because your king offered me protection when my own pack threw me away for being different. I'm here because he looked at me and saw potential instead of threat. I'm here because maybe, just maybe, the prophecy isn't about choosing between salvation and destruction. Maybe it's about choosing to be better than our fears." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. They just stared at her like she was something they'd never seen before. Something that didn't fit into any category they understood. Not quite wolf. Not quite human. Not quite anything except powerful and real and standing in front of them refusing to apologize for existing. And then someone started clapping. Slow. Deliberate. The sound echoing through the hall. Aria's eyes snapped to the source and found Stellan standing, his weathered hands coming together in genuine applause, a smile on his face that looked like respect and approval and something like hope. That, he said, his voice carrying authority despite his age, was a demonstration of control I've rarely seen from wolves twice your age with half your power. You've proven your point, girl. You're not a mindless threat. You're a warrior learning to wield a weapon most of us can't even comprehend. Other wolves began to stand. Not all of them. Not even most of them. But enough. Enough to show that opinion was divided. That not everyone had decided she was enemy. That maybe, possibly, she'd bought herself time and space and something resembling acceptance. But not everyone was convinced. That changes nothing. A new voice. Cold. Venomous. Coming from the far side of the hall where shadows still clung despite the torchlight. A wolf stepped forward, and Aria recognized him from descriptions Talia had given her. Malek. Alpha of the Eastern Borderlands. Known for his traditional views, his rigid interpretation of pack law, his belief that anything different was dangerous. You've shown you can control your power in a controlled environment, with your king watching, with no real threat or stress. But what happens when darkness actually comes? What happens when you're terrified and fighting for your life, and that control slips? What happens when the power decides it doesn't want to be contained anymore? He moved closer to the center, circling her like a predator assessing prey. I've seen wolves with power before. Seen them lose control. Seen what happens when magic overwhelms mortal limitations. It's never pretty. It's never clean. And it always ends with innocent wolves paying the price for someone else's curse. His eyes locked onto hers, and there was hatred there. Deep, visceral, personal hatred that went beyond politics or prophecy. My mate died because of uncontrolled power. A witch who thought she could channel ancient magic without consequence. Who thought she had it mastered. And when it slipped, when she lost control for just 1 second, she killed everyone within 100 yards. Including herself. Including the female I loved more than life itself. The pain in his voice was real. Raw. And Aria felt it like a physical blow. Because she understood. Understood why he looked at her and saw a threat. Why he couldn't separate her from his trauma. Why trusting her meant risking everything all over again. I'm sorry for your loss, she said quietly. Truly. But I'm not her. I'm not the witch who killed your mate. And punishing me for someone else's mistakes isn't justice. It's just more pain spreading outward. More fear creating more suffering. Fear keeps us alive. Malek's voice was hard. Final. Fear is what prevents us from trusting the wrong wolves, from making mistakes that cost lives. And my fear is telling me that you're a risk we can't afford to take. That keeping you here, training you, allowing you to grow stronger, it's inviting disaster. It's setting up the very tragedy the prophecies warn about. He turned to Damien. My king, I respect your authority. I've supported your rule since you took the throne. But I'm asking you now, as an alpha who's served you faithfully, who's lost everything to uncontrolled power, don't do this. Don't let sentiment cloud your judgment. Send her away. Exile her to somewhere remote where she can't hurt anyone if control fails. Or end this permanently. But don't keep her here. Don't tie our survival to the mercy of ancient magic that doesn't care about individuals or territories or anything except its own mysterious purpose. Other voices rose in agreement. Not all the alphas, but enough. Enough to show that Malak wasn't alone. That there were wolves in this hall who would never trust her, would never accept her, would fight against her presence with every breath until either she was gone or they were. Aria felt something crack inside her chest. Because she'd tried. She'd shown them her power. She'd proven her control. She'd offered peace and understanding and every possible reassurance. And it still wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Because fear didn't respond to logic or evidence or proof. Fear responded to fear. And these wolves were drowning in it. Damien stood again. And this time, the temperature didn't just drop, it plummeted. The air became heavy, oppressive, charged with the kind of power that made every instinct scream danger. He descended from his throne, moving with that predatory grace that reminded everyone exactly why he was king, exactly what he was capable of, exactly why challenging him was a death sentence. Let me be very clear. His voice was quiet, but somehow louder than shouting. Aria stays. Under my protection. In my fortress. Training with my resources. And anyone who has a problem with that decision can bring it up with me. Personally. Outside. Right now. The challenge was unmistakable. The threat explicit. He was willing to fight every alpha in this room if that's what it took to protect her. Willing to risk his carefully maintained authority, his political alliances, everything he'd built. For one marked wolf who wasn't even officially his. Unless she was. Unless the bond they both felt, the connection that grew stronger every day, meant she was his in every way that mattered. His to protect. His to defend. His to stand beside even if it meant standing alone. Malak's jaw clenched. You're making a mistake. Then it's my mistake to make. Damien's eyes swept the hall, making sure every wolf understood. I am your king. My word is law. My decisions are final. And I have decided that Aria is an asset to this realm. That her power will be needed when darkness comes. That protecting her now means protecting all of you later. If you can't accept that, if you can't trust my judgment after 5 years of keeping you safe and maintaining peace, then perhaps you need a new king. The words hung in the air like a blade. Because that was the ultimate challenge. The ultimate test of his authority. He was offering them the chance to rebel, to vote no confidence, to try to overthrow him. Knowing that none of them were strong enough individually. Knowing that collectively they might pose a threat, but would fracture the realm in the process. Knowing that fear of what he might do is still stronger than fear of what Aria might become. No one moved. No one accepted the challenge. They just sat in their seats, wrestling with anger and fear and the crushing reality that they had no choice but to accept his decision. Because the alternative was civil war. And civil war would destroy them all long before any prophecy could. Damien turned his attention back to Aria. His expression was still cold, still controlled, but his eyes were burning with something fierce and protective and absolutely certain. Council dismissed. We'll reconvene tomorrow to discuss actual threats instead of manufacturing new ones. Everyone out. The alphas began to stand, filing toward the exits with varying degrees of anger and resignation. Malak lingered, his gaze locked on Aria with promise of future confrontation. Mira looked thoughtful, like she was reassessing her position. Stellan nodded to her in passing, something like approval in his old eyes. And Corvin just looked tired, like he'd expected this outcome, but had hoped for something different. Within minutes, the hall was empty except for Aria, Damien, and Talia standing guard at the door. The silence was deafening after all that noise, all that tension, all that barely contained violence. Aria's legs gave out. She didn't mean to collapse, didn't want to show weakness. But the adrenaline was crashing, the exhaustion from summoning that much power was hitting her all at once, and suddenly the stone floor was rushing up to meet her. Strong arms caught her before she hit. Damien. He'd moved faster than thought, faster than possible, crossing the distance and catching her like he'd been waiting for this moment. "I've got you." His voice was different now. Soft. Private. Meant only for her. The king's mask had dropped, revealing the man underneath. The man who'd just threatened to fight his entire council for her sake. "You did well. So well. But you need to rest now. You used too much power too fast." Aria wanted to argue. Wanted to stand on her own. But her body wasn't cooperating. She sagged against him, letting his strength hold her up, feeling the solid warmth of his chest beneath her cheek. "Did I make it worse? Did I just cost you political capital you can't afford to lose? You made them see you." His arms tightened around her. "Made them understand you're real. Human. Powerful but not uncontrollable. That's worth more than political capital. That's the beginning of acceptance. Half of them still want me dead. Only half. The other half are undecided or willing to give you a chance. That's better odds than we had this morning." He lifted her easily, cradling her against his chest like she weighed nothing. "Come on. Let's get you somewhere safe. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere you can fall apart without an audience." He carried her through corridors she didn't recognize, moving deeper into the fortress, into private areas where guards nodded and stepped aside without question. Talia followed at a distance, giving them space, but staying close enough to intervene if needed. And Aria just closed her eyes, let exhaustion pull her under, let herself be carried by someone who'd proven, in front of everyone who mattered, that he would choose her. Protect her. Stand beside her even when standing alone would be easier. The mate bond pulsed between them. Stronger now. More real. Acknowledged in action even if not yet in words. And as consciousness slipped away, as exhaustion claimed her, Aria's last coherent thought was that she'd finally found it. The thing the first flame had told her to look for. Something worth protecting. Someone who saw her as more than a weapon or a threat. She'd found him. Or he'd found her. And heaven help them both, because the world was about to tear them apart for daring to choose each other over fear. The storm was coming. The darkness was rising. And the first clash had proven that the greatest threat wouldn't come from ancient evils or shadow beasts. It would come from the wolves who were supposed to be allies. From fear that turned friends into enemies. From the terrible reality that sometimes the hardest battles were fought not against monsters, but against the people who should have been standing beside you. But as Damien carried her to safety, as his heartbeat steadied her own, as the bond between them sang with something that felt like destiny, Aria knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, whatever battles they'd have to fight, whatever prices they'd have to pay, they'd face it together. Or they'd burn the world trying. Aria woke to firelight and the smell of cedar. Not the massive bedroom with silk sheets and windows overlooking the courtyard. Somewhere else. Smaller. More intimate. She opened her eyes slowly, her body heavy with the kind of exhaustion that came from pushing too hard, too fast, too far beyond what she was ready for. The room came into focus gradually. Stone walls covered with tapestries, a fireplace crackling with warmth, shelves lined with books and maps and objects that looked old and meaningful. Personal things. Things chosen with care instead of for display. This was Damien's private study. She knew it instinctively, even though she'd never been here before. Could feel his presence in every corner, every choice, every detail that spoke of a man who valued knowledge and solitude and the rare moments when he could drop his mask and just be. And he was there, sitting in a chair beside the fire, still dressed in the formal clothes he'd worn for the council meeting, but his jacket was gone and his shirt was partially unlaced, his hair falling forward as he leaned over something in his lap. He looked tired. More tired than she'd ever seen him. Like the weight of ruling, of maintaining authority, of standing between her and a council full of wolves who wanted her gone, like all of it had finally caught up with him. "You're staring." His voice was quiet, but there was warmth in it. Almost amusement. He looked up, and those dark eyes found hers across the flickering shadows. "How do you feel?" "Like I got trampled by a pack of wolves." Which, technically, I kind of did. She tried to sit up, and her muscles screamed in protest. Every part of her body hurt. Not injury. Just the deep, bone-level ache that came from channeling more power than her mortal form was designed to handle. "How long was I out?" 6 hours. He set aside what he'd been reading, a book, ancient-looking, the pages yellowed with age. "You burned through your energy reserves completely. Sarah said it's normal for your skill level. That you'll build stamina as you train. But you need to be more careful. Pushing too hard can cause permanent damage." Aria managed to swing her legs off the couch where she'd been lying, her feet finding soft carpet. The room spun slightly, but she forced it to steady. "I didn't have a choice. They wanted a demonstration. I gave them one. You gave them more than a demonstration. You gave them a show." He stood, moving to a side table where a pitcher and glasses waited. He poured water and brought it to her. Silver wolves running through the hall. Your eyes glowing. The mark visible through your clothes. You looked like something out of legend. Out of prophecy. Exactly what they're afraid of. She took the water gratefully, drinking deeply before responding. "But I controlled it. Didn't I? I showed them I could contain the power. Direct it. That's what you wanted. I wanted you safe." The words came out harder than she expected. Raw. "I wanted you to stay hidden. Let me handle the politics. Avoid making yourself a target. Instead, you walked into the middle of a council meeting and painted a bullseye on your back." Aria set the glass down carefully. "You would have protected me. Defended me. Fought your entire council if they'd voted to exile me." "I know you would have." She met his eyes. "But I couldn't let you do that. Couldn't let you sacrifice your authority, your alliances, everything you've built, just to protect one runaway wolf with a curse she can't control." "It's not a curse." Damien's voice was sharp. Final. "And you're not just one runaway wolf. He stopped. Looked away. Tension radiating from every line of his body. Whatever he'd been about to say, he swallowed it back. Locked it down. The mask trying to slide back into place. But Aria was tired of masks. Tired of pretending. Tired of dancing around the thing they both felt, the connection that grew stronger every day, the bond that was becoming impossible to ignore. She stood on shaky legs, crossed the distance between them, and touched his arm. He went completely still. Like her touch had frozen him. Like he was afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid that any reaction would shatter whatever fragile control he was maintaining. "What am I?" she asked softly. "Finish the sentence. Tell me what you were going to say." His jaw clenched. "You're important. Strategically. Prophetically. Your power could be the difference between survival and annihilation when the darkness comes." That's the political answer. She didn't pull her hand away. Didn't let him hide behind strategy and prophecy. "That's what you'd tell the council. Tell your advisors. Tell anyone who asked. But that's not what you were going to say just now. That's not why you stood in front of your alphas and offered to fight them all to keep me safe." Damien turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes stole her breath. "You want the truth? The real reason?" His hand came up to cover hers where it rested on his arm. "You're mine. In every way that matters. In every way the bond between us keeps insisting on. You're mine to protect. Mine to defend. Mine to stand beside even when it costs me everything. And I don't know when it happened or how it happened or if I even have a choice anymore. But looking at you, being near you, knowing you exist in this world, it's the only thing that's felt real in 5 years." The confession hung between them, raw and honest and dangerous. Because admitting it out loud changed everything. Made it real. Made it something they couldn't take back or pretend didn't exist. Aria's heart was racing. The mate bond. That's what this is. What we're feeling. Maybe. Probably. I don't know. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, the touch gentle, careful, like he was handling something precious. I've never felt a mate bond before. Never wanted to. Watched my father use his mate as a political tool, watched him destroy her slowly by treating her as property instead of partner. Swore I'd never tie myself to anyone like that. Never give anyone that kind of power over me. He stepped closer, and suddenly there was no space between them. Just heat and proximity and the overwhelming awareness of his body so close to hers. But then I found you. Tracked you for months. Watched you survive when survival should have been impossible. Saw you refuse to break even when breaking would have been easier. And something in me recognized something in you. Like calling to like. Darkness recognizing darkness. Loneliness recognizing loneliness. His free hand came up to cup her face, his palm warm against her cheek. I don't know if it's fate or magic or just two broken people finding each other in the chaos. But I know that when I'm with you, I feel like maybe I'm not as heartless as they say. Maybe there's something still alive inside me that knows how to care. How to protect something other than territories and alliances. How to want something beyond power and control. Aria couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Could only feel the warmth of his hands, the intensity of his gaze, the way her entire body was responding to his proximity, like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment. Damien, tell me to stop. His voice dropped lower, rougher, edged with something hungry and desperate and barely controlled. Tell me this isn't what you want. Tell me you don't feel it too. Tell me to walk away and let you figure out your destiny alone. Because if you don't, if you let this happen, there's no going back. The bond will solidify. We'll be tied together in ways that transcend pack law and political alliances. And my enemies will use you against me. Will threaten you to control me. Will hurt you to make me suffer. I know. She did know. Understood the risks. Understood that accepting this bond meant accepting danger and complication and a target that would never go away. But she also understood something else. Something more important. I know the risks. Know what it costs. But I'm tired of running from everything. Tired of being afraid of connections because they might be used against me. Tired of being alone because alone feels safer than vulnerable. She turned her face into his palm, letting herself lean into his touch, letting herself accept what she'd been fighting for weeks. You're not the only broken one here. You're not the only one who's spent years building walls to keep everyone out. But maybe two broken people can be less broken together. Maybe we can protect each other instead of just surviving separately. Something in Damien's expression shifted. Cracked. The mask falling away completely, revealing vulnerability and hope and fear all tangled together. If I do this, if I claim you as mine, I won't be gentle about it. Won't hide it or pretend it's just political strategy. The entire realm will know you're under my protection. That hurting you means declaring war on me. That you're not just some marked wolf I'm studying. You're my mate. My partner. The one person in this entire world who matters more than kingdoms. Good. The word came out steady. Certain. Because I'm tired of hiding what we are. Tired of pretending this pull between us is just prophecy or strategy or anything other than what it actually is. We're mates. We found each other. And I don't care if it's inconvenient or dangerous or if the timing is terrible. I'm not running anymore. Not from my power. Not from my destiny. And not from you. Damien's control finally snapped. He pulled her against him, one hand tangling in her hair, the other wrapping around her waist, holding her close like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. His forehead pressed against hers, their breath mingling, their hearts beating in sync. The bond between them blazed to life, no longer something they could ignore or suppress. It was there. Real. Solid. A connection that went deeper than blood or magic or anything either of them had ever experienced. I'm going to kiss you now. His voice was rough, strained with the effort of giving her one last chance to refuse. And when I do, the bond will recognize it. We'll seal. We'll make this permanent. Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure this is what you want? Aria answered by closing the distance between them. The kiss was everything she'd imagined and nothing like she'd expected. Gentle at first. Tentative. like he was afraid of breaking her. His lips soft against hers, questioning, seeking permission with every movement. She gave it. Open to him. Let him deepen the kiss, let him pull her closer until there was no space between them, until she could feel every line of his body against hers, solid and warm and real. The bond exploded between them. Silver fire racing through her veins, meeting something darker in his ancient alpha power, the magic of kingship, the strength of centuries of lineage. They tangled together, silver and shadow, light and dark, two opposing forces that shouldn't work but somehow fit perfectly. The mark on her shoulder blazed hot enough to make her gasp into the kiss, and she felt an answering heat from Damien, felt his power responding to hers, recognizing her, claiming her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, both shaking slightly from the intensity of it, Aria saw that his eyes had changed. Darker. Edged with gold that hadn't been there before. The visible sign of a mate bond completed. Of a connection that went beyond physical, beyond emotional, into something primal and permanent. You're mine now. He said it like a vow. Like a promise. Like an unbreakable law. And I'm yours. The bond is sealed. Everyone will feel it. Everyone will know. Good. Aria's voice was steadier than she felt. Let them know. Let them understand that I'm not alone. That I have someone standing beside me. That hurting me means facing you. Damien's hand cupped her face again, his thumb brushing across her lips. They're going to use this against us. Malek. Corvin. Every alpha who resents my authority or fears your power. They'll see this as weakness. As proof that I'm compromised. Then let them try. She turned her face to press a kiss to his palm. We'll face them together. Face everything together. Because that's what mates do. That's what this bond means. He pulled her back against him, wrapping her in his arms, his chin resting on top of her head. They stood there in the firelight, holding each other, letting the reality of what they'd just done settle over them. It should have felt terrifying. Should have felt like a mistake. But all Aria felt was rightness. Like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. Like finding home after years of wandering. Tell me about your father. The words came out quietly. Tell me about the man you killed to become king. About why they call you Heartless. Damien was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant. Haunted. My father was a monster. Not metaphorically. Not politically. Actually. A wolf who valued power above everything. Who started wars because he was bored. Who killed anyone who questioned him, including his own advisors, his own guards, even members of his own family. Under his rule, the packs were tearing each other apart. Territories burning. Bloodlines ending. Everything spiraling toward complete chaos. His arms tightened around her. I was his heir. Expected to follow his example. To rule with the same cruelty, the same disregard for life. But I couldn't. I saw what his reign was doing. Saw the fear in everyone's eyes. Saw how close we were to destroying ourselves completely. So I challenged him. Publicly. Gave him the chance to step down peacefully, to let me take over and rebuild what he'd broken. And he refused. He laughed. Said I was weak. Soft. Unworthy of the throne. Said if I wanted to rule, I'd have to kill him for it. Damien's voice went flat. Empty. So I did. In front of the entire court. In front of every alpha and representative. I shifted. He shifted. And we fought. It wasn't quick. Wasn't clean. He was stronger, more experienced, more brutal. But I was desperate. And desperate wolves don't fight fair. Aria could feel the tension radiating through him. The memory still raw even 5 years later. How did you do it? How did you win? I stopped trying to fight honorably. Stopped trying to match his strength. Started using speed. Strategy. His own rage against him. Waited until he overextended, until his arrogance made him sloppy. And then I went for his throat. Ended it. Stood over his body and declared myself king while his blood was still warm on my hands. He pulled back enough to look down at her, and there was pain in his eyes. Deep, old pain that had never healed. The alphas bowed. accepted my rule because the alternative was worse. But they called me heartless within days. Said I'd shown no emotion, no grief, no remorse, just cold efficiency. And they were right. In that moment, standing over my father's body, claiming his throne, I felt nothing. No sadness, no guilt, just relief that it was over. That I could finally stop the bleeding and start rebuilding. But you did feel it. Aria's hand pressed against his chest, right over his heart. Talia told me you disappeared for 3 days afterward. That when you came back, your eyes were red from crying. You felt everything. You just didn't let them see it. Damien's expression cracked. I couldn't. Showing weakness would have invited challenges. Would have made them think I was vulnerable. That they could take me down the way I'd taken him down. So I buried it. Locked it away. Became the Heartless King because that's what they needed. What the realm needed. A ruler strong enough to hold everything together through fear when love and loyalty had failed. Aria pulled his head down, pressing her forehead against his again. You're not heartless. You're just careful about who you show your heart to. About who you trust with the parts of you that can be hurt. And I understand that. Understand why you built walls. Why you kept everyone at a distance. Because I did the same thing. Locked my power away. Locked myself away. Survived by being invisible because being seen meant being hurt. We're quite a pair. Damien's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Two people who spent years avoiding connection. Avoiding vulnerability. And now we're tied together in the most permanent way possible. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. Or maybe it knows what it's doing. Aria stepped back slightly, but kept their hands linked. Maybe we needed to find each other. Needed someone who understood what it costs to survive when the world sees you as either threat or tool. Someone who won't break under the pressure of what we are. What we're meant to do. Damien brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. The darkness is coming. You know that. Saris has seen it. The signs are everywhere. Shadow beasts crossing borders. Ancient seals weakening. The convergence approaching. When it arrives, when the real battle begins, you're going to be at the center of it. The prophecy points to you. The mark identifies you. Whatever's coming, it's coming for you. I know. And she did know. Could feel it sometimes when she was training, when the power flowed through her. A sense of something watching. Something waiting. Something ancient and hungry and aware that she existed. But now I have you. Have the bond. Have someone who can help me face it instead of facing it alone. I'll stand with you. Damien's voice was absolutely certain. Whatever comes. Whatever the prophecy demands. Whatever choice you have to make. I'll be there. We'll face it together. And if the darkness wants you, it'll have to go through me first. The vow settled between them, heavy with meaning. With commitment. With the understanding that they'd just tied their fates together in ways that went beyond personal choice. They were mates now. Bound. Connected. And whatever destiny had in store for one would affect the other. A knock on the door broke the moment. Talia's voice came through, careful and respectful. My king. Aria. I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation. Damien's expression hardened immediately. The mask sliding back into place. The king emerging to deal with whatever crisis had arrived. Come in. Talia entered, and her face was grim. It's Malek. He left the fortress an hour ago. Took his entire delegation with him. But before he left, he sent messages. To every alpha in the realm. Calling for a vote of no confidence. Claiming you're compromised. That the Marked One has clouded your judgment. That you're unfit to rule if you're willing to risk the realm's safety for personal attachment. The words hung in the air like poison. Like the exact thing they'd feared. The bond between them being used as a weapon. As proof that Damien was weak. Vulnerable. No longer the Heartless King, but someone who could be manipulated through his mate. Aria felt sick. This is my fault. I should have stayed hidden. Should have. No. Damien's voice cut through her spiral. Sharp. Absolute. This is not your fault. This is Malek using his pain and fear to justify tearing down everything I've built. He wants chaos. wants a return to the old ways where power was determined by who could fight the hardest and kill the most. The bond between us is just an excuse. If it wasn't this, he'd find something else. He turned to Talia. How many alphas are responding? How many are considering his proposal? At least 7 so far. More are undecided. Talia's expression was troubled. If he gets enough support, he can call for a challenge. Force you to defend your right to rule. It would fracture everything. Turn the packs against each other. Undo 5 years of peace. Damien was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly working through options, strategies, ways to counter this move without making everything worse. When he spoke, his voice was controlled, measured. The voice of a king who'd faced worse and survived. Send word to every alpha, every territory. Call them back. Tomorrow night, another council meeting. And this time, Aria and I face them together. As mates. As partners. We show them that the bond doesn't weaken me. It strengthens both of us. We show them that unity is possible even with difference. That love doesn't have to be weakness. He looked at Aria. Are you ready for that? Ready to stand in front of them all and claim this bond publicly? Ready to tie yourself to me in ways that make you a political target and a personal threat to anyone who opposes my rule? Aria thought about running. About how easy it would be to slip away, to disappear, to spare him this fight. To save him from having to choose between his mate and his kingdom. But she'd already made her choice. Already decided she was done running. And more than that, she believed in what he was trying to build. Believed in the possibility of a realm where power didn't have to mean cruelty. Where different didn't have to mean dangerous. I'm ready. She squared her shoulders. We do this together. Face them together. Show them that the Heartless King found his heart, and it didn't break him. It made him stronger. Made us stronger. Damien pulled her close again, kissing the top of her head. Then we fight. Together. And may the gods help anyone who tries to tear us apart. Because they'll discover exactly why I'm called Heartless. Why I'm feared. Why challenging me is the last mistake most wolves ever make. Talia bowed her head. I'll send the messages. Prepare the hall. And I'll make sure your guard is ready. Because tomorrow night, things are going to get ugly. She left, closing the door behind her, leaving Aria and Damien alone again in the firelight. In the quiet before the storm. In the eye of a hurricane that was about to tear through everything they cared about. Aria turned in his arms, looking up at him. What if they vote against you? What if Malik gets enough support? What if we lose? Then we lose together. Damien's eyes held hers. And we figure out what comes next. But we don't run. We don't hide. We don't let fear win. Because the moment we do that, the moment we let them separate us or silence us or make us ashamed of what we are, we've already lost everything that matters. He kissed her again. Softer this time. Sweeter. A promise and a vow and a commitment all wrapped into one gesture. Get some rest. Tomorrow is going to be the hardest fight of our lives. And you need to be strong. Need to be ready to show them exactly what we are together. What we can become if they give us the chance. Aria nodded. Let him lead her back to the couch. Let him tuck a blanket around her like she was something precious. Something worth protecting. She watched him settle back into his chair, picking up the ancient book again, keeping watch while she rested. Guarding her even in his own private space. Even when they were alone. As her eyes drifted closed, as exhaustion pulled her back under, she heard him murmur something so quietly she almost missed it. I love you, Silver Flame. Whatever happens tomorrow. Whatever the realm decides. Whatever destiny has in store. I love you. And that's worth fighting for. Worth burning everything down for if that's what it takes. The words wrapped around her heart, warm and certain and terrifying. Because love was the most dangerous thing they could admit. The most powerful weapon their enemies could use against them. The one thing that could destroy them both if it was twisted or broken or torn apart. But it was also the one thing that made the fighting worth it. Made the fear bearable. Made the impossible seem possible. Tomorrow they'd face the realm. Face the alphas and the politics and the terrible choice between love and duty. Tomorrow they'd find out if the bond between them was strong enough to weather the storm. If their connection could survive when the entire world was trying to tear them apart. But tonight they had each other. Had this moment of peace before the battle. Had the certainty that whatever came next, they wouldn't face it alone. And sometimes, that was enough. Sometimes, love was enough. Even when the darkness was rising. Even when the prophecy was in motion. Even when the entire realm was about to explode into chaos. Love was enough. It had to be. Because if it wasn't, if love couldn't save them, couldn't protect them, couldn't give them the strength to face what was coming, then nothing would. And the darkness would win before the real battle even began. The council hall was packed. Not just alphas this time. Everyone. Representatives from every territory, advisors from every pack, guards lining the walls with weapons visible and ready, wolves who'd traveled for days just to witness what everyone knew was coming. A reckoning. A judgment. The moment when the Lycan King would either solidify his authority or watch it crumble beneath the weight of a bond that shouldn't exist. Aria stood at Damien's side on the raised platform where his throne sat, and she could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes assessing her. Judging her. Measuring her against whatever expectations or fears they carried. She wore formal clothes now, dark leather and silk that Talia had insisted upon, clothes that marked her as important, as someone who belonged on this platform instead of hiding in the shadows. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders, and she'd stopped trying to hide the mark. It showed through the carefully designed back of her tunic, the silver crescent moon visible to everyone, glowing faintly in the torchlight like a brand that announced exactly what she was. Damien looked like a king. Like the Heartless king everyone feared. Dark clothing that seemed to absorb light, his hair pulled back to reveal the sharp planes of his face, his expression carved from stone and giving away nothing. But his hand was wrapped around hers, their fingers intertwined, and that simple gesture spoke louder than any speech or declaration. It said, "She is mine. I am hers. Challenge this, and you challenge me." The room was deathly quiet. Waiting. Every wolf present could feel the tension crackling through the air like lightning about to strike. This wasn't just politics. This was personal. This was the future of the realm being decided by whether fear or trust would win. Whether the packs could accept a king who chose love over reputation, or whether they'd tear him down for daring to be human. Malek stood at the center of the horseshoe of tables, his posture rigid, his eyes cold. He'd positioned himself as the voice of opposition, the champion of wolves who believed Aria was too dangerous to tolerate. Around him, other alphas who'd sided with his call for a vote of no confidence. 7 in total. Not a majority. But enough to cause serious damage if they pushed this to its conclusion. "My king." Malek's voice carried through the vast space, formal, but edged with something sharp. "Thank you for calling this assembly. For giving us the opportunity to address concerns that affect every wolf in this realm. Concerns about your judgment. About your priorities. About whether you can still lead effectively when you've allowed personal attachment to compromise your decision-making." Damien's expression didn't change. "State your grievance formally, Alpha Malek. Let everyone present understand exactly what you're accusing me of." Malek inclined his head. "Very well. I accuse you of prioritizing one individual over the safety of the realm. Of harboring a wolf with uncontrolled ancient power despite warnings from multiple alphas about the danger she represents. Of forming a mate bond that makes you vulnerable to manipulation and creates a weakness your enemies can exploit. And of refusing to acknowledge that your attachment to this marked wolf has clouded your ability to make objective decisions about what's best for our people." He paused, letting that sink in. Letting every wolf present absorb the accusations. "I'm not questioning your strength, my king. Not questioning your ability to rule under normal circumstances. But these aren't normal circumstances. The darkness is rising. War is coming. And we need a leader who can make hard choices without sentiment getting in the way. A leader who will sacrifice anything, even someone he loves, if that's what it takes to protect the realm." The words landed like blows. Calculated. Precise. Designed to paint Damien as weak without directly challenging his authority. designed to make the bond between them look like liability instead of strength. Aria felt Damien's hand tighten around hers. Felt the surge of anger and frustration running through him. But his voice when he spoke was perfectly controlled. Perfectly calm. The voice of a king who'd faced worse challenges and survived. You're right about one thing, Alpha Malik. These aren't normal circumstances. The darkness is rising. War is coming. The convergence approaches faster than the prophecies predicted. And in the face of all that, yes, I formed a mate bond. Yes, I've chosen to stand beside someone the realm fears. Yes, I've made a decision that looks like weakness to those who measure strength only in isolation and emotional control. He stepped forward, bringing Aria with him, their joined hands visible to everyone. But let me tell you what that bond represents. It represents the future. It represents the possibility that power and connection can coexist. That we don't have to rule alone, sacrifice everyone we care about, destroy ourselves emotionally in order to be effective leaders. It represents hope that maybe, just maybe, we can face what's coming without becoming the very monsters we're trying to protect against. His eyes swept the crowd, making sure every wolf understood. My father ruled alone. Trusted no one. Loved nothing. And under his reign, we nearly destroyed ourselves. I've spent 5 years holding this realm together through strength and fear and the reputation of being heartless. But strength without connection is just tyranny. Fear without trust is just oppression. And being heartless doesn't make you a better leader. It just makes you a lonely one. He turned to look at Aria, and something in his expression softened. Just for a moment. Just enough to show everyone present that this was real. That the bond between them wasn't political strategy or manipulation. It was genuine. Aria is my mate. The bond between us is sealed and permanent. But more than that, she's my partner. My equal. Someone who makes me stronger, not weaker. Someone who reminds me that the wolves we're protecting are individuals with lives and loves and connections worth preserving. Not just numbers on a map or pieces in a political game. He looked back at Malik. So yes, I chose her. I choose her. Every day. Every moment. And that choice doesn't compromise my ability to lead. It reinforces it. Because now I have something worth fighting for beyond power and control. Now I have a reason to make sure this realm survives that goes deeper than duty or obligation. The hall erupted in whispers. Wolves turning to each other, debating, arguing, processing what they'd just heard. Some looked moved. Others looked skeptical. And Malik looked furious. Pretty words, my king. But words don't change reality. His voice cut through the noise. The marked one is dangerous. Her power is unstable. The prophecies warn of destruction as much as salvation. And your attachment to her blinds you to the risk. When the darkness comes, when she's faced with impossible choices, when the power overwhelms her mortal limitations, what then? Will your love protect us? Will your bond save the innocent wolves who die because you refused to eliminate a threat when you had the chance? She's not a threat. Damien's voice went cold. Dangerous. She's the solution. The prophecy speaks of choice. Malik interrupted, and there were gasps throughout the hall at his audacity. At his willingness to challenge the king so directly. Choice between salvation and destruction. Between protecting the realm and burning it down. And you're assuming she'll choose correctly. You're gambling everything on the hope that when the moment comes, she'll sacrifice herself instead of sacrificing all of us. That's not leadership. That's wishful thinking. He moved closer to the platform, his eyes burning with conviction. With pain that hadn't healed. With fear that had calcified into hatred. I loved my mate. Trusted her completely. Believed she could control her power right up until the moment she couldn't. Right up until the moment she lost control and killed everyone near her, including herself. I live with that failure every day. I see her face every time I close my eyes. And I will not stand by and watch you make the same mistake I did. I will not let sentiment destroy this realm the way it destroyed my life. The raw emotion in his voice silenced the hall. Because this wasn't just politics anymore. This was personal. This was a wolf who'd lost everything trying to prevent others from experiencing the same tragedy. It was misguided. It was driven by trauma. But it was real. Aria felt something shift inside her. Felt compassion rising despite everything. Because she understood. Understood what it was like to be afraid of your own power. To have people look at you and see danger instead of person. To carry the weight of knowing you could hurt everyone you cared about if you lost control for even a second. She stepped forward, releasing Damien's hand, moving to the edge of the platform. Alpha Malak. I'm sorry for your loss. Truly. What happened to your mate? That's tragedy beyond measure. Beyond words. And I understand why you look at me and see her. See the same danger. The same risk. Her voice carried through the hall, steady despite the fear coursing through her. But I'm not her. I'm not a witch trying to channel power beyond my understanding. I'm a wolf marked by ancient magic that lives in my blood. That's part of me. And yes, it's dangerous. Yes, it's powerful. Yes, there's risk. But I've spent months training, learning control, understanding what this power is and what it can do. And I'm not alone. I have Damien. I have Saris. I have support and guidance and people who believe I can master this instead of being mastered by it. She let silver fire dance across her palms. Small. Controlled. Beautiful instead of terrifying. Look at this. Really look. This is ancient magic responding to my will. Not consuming me. Not overwhelming me. Doing exactly what I ask it to do. Because I've stopped fighting it. Stopped being afraid of it. Stopped letting other people's fear define what I am. The flames grew brighter, taking shape. A wolf. Silver and luminous and running in circles around her. The prophecy says I have a choice. And you're right. I do. When the darkness comes, when I'm faced with impossible decisions, I'll have to choose. But that choice won't be between salvation and destruction. It'll be about what I'm willing to sacrifice. What I'm willing to risk. What I value more, my own safety or everyone else's survival. She pulled the flames back, letting them sink beneath her skin. And I can tell you right now, standing in front of all of you, if it comes down to my life or the realm's survival, I choose the realm. I choose sacrifice. I choose doing whatever it takes to protect innocent wolves from the darkness. Even if it means burning myself out completely. Even if it means becoming the destruction the prophecy warns about in order to destroy something worse. The words hung in the air. A vow. A promise. A commitment that went beyond politics or personal safety. Aria met Malak's eyes. I can't give you certainty. Can't promise I'll never lose control. Can't guarantee that loving me won't cost Damien everything. But I can promise that I'll fight. That I'll train. That I'll do everything in my power to be worthy of the faith he's placed in me. And if I fail, if the worst happens and I become the threat you fear, then I expect him to do what needs to be done. To choose the realm over me. To be the king these wolves need even if it destroys him personally. She looked back at Damien, seeing the conflict in his eyes. The way her words had hit him. The way he wanted to argue, to refuse, to insist he'd never sacrifice her no matter what. But he stayed silent. Because he understood. Because he knew she was right. Because being a king meant making impossible choices, and if she became a threat, he'd have to be strong enough to stop her. The realization of that, the acceptance of it, passed between them in a look. A moment of understanding that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. They loved each other. They were mates. They were bound in ways that transcended choice. But they were also leaders. Protectors. People who'd accepted responsibility for more than their own happiness. And sometimes, love meant being willing to let go. Even when letting go would destroy you. Malak's expression had shifted. The rage was still there, but underneath it, something else. Respect. Grudging understanding. He looked at Aria like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Not as a threat. Not as a monster. But as someone who understood the weight of power. The burden of being dangerous. The terrible knowledge that loving you might hurt the people you loved most. You remind me of her, he said quietly. My mate. The way you speak. The way you accept responsibility. The way you're willing to sacrifice yourself. His voice roughened. She said something similar. Right before the end. Said if it came down to it, she'd choose to protect us over protecting herself. And I believed her. Trusted her. Right up until the moment when survival instinct overrode intention and her power exploded outward instead of inward. He took a breath. Let it out. I can't support you. Can't trust that when the moment comes, you'll be strong enough to choose death over survival. That's not weakness. That's just reality. Every living thing fights to survive. And when you're faced with the choice between dying and letting your power save you, instinct will win. It always wins. Then help me be stronger than instinct. Aria's voice was urgent now. Pleading. Help me train. Help me prepare. Don't fight against me. Fight with me. Teach me what your mate couldn't learn. Show me how to override survival instinct with purpose. With commitment. With something worth dying for. She gestured to the assembled wolves. All of you. Every alpha. Every representative. Every wolf who's afraid of what I might become. Don't exile me. Don't kill me. Don't waste the potential I represent. Use me. Train me. Make me into the weapon you need. Make me strong enough that when the choice comes, I can make it consciously instead of instinctively. Malak was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, he turned to address the hall. I call for a vote. Not on whether the king should step down. Not on whether his judgment is compromised. But on this. Do we accept the marked one as an asset to be trained and utilized? Or do we exile her as a threat too dangerous to harbor? It was a compromise. A middle ground. Not supporting the bond, but not fighting it either. Just deciding whether Aria herself was worth the risk. Whether her potential value outweighed the danger she represented. Damien's jaw clenched. This wasn't what he wanted. Wasn't the full acceptance he'd hoped for. But it was better than civil war. Better than watching the realm tear itself apart over a mate bond. He looked at Aria and she nodded. Accepting the terms. Accepting that trust had to be earned gradually, not demanded immediately. All in favor of accepting Aria as an asset, someone to be trained and prepared for the darkness ahead. Signal now. Damien's voice was formal. Cold. The king making a political calculation instead of defending his mate with force. Hands rose throughout the hall. Not everyone. Not even close to everyone. But more than half. Stellan. Several of the northern alphas. Younger wolves who looked at Aria and saw possibility instead of threat. Representatives from territories that had suffered under the old king's reign and understood that change required risk. All opposed. Fewer hands this time. Malak. The alphas who'd stood with him. Wolves from territories that valued tradition over innovation. Elders who'd lived through too much chaos to trust anything that disrupted established order. But they were the minority. Not by much. But enough. The vote passes. Damien's voice carried authority and exhaustion in equal measure. Aria remains under my protection. She will continue training with Saris. She will be integrated into preparation for the convergence. And anyone who attempts to harm her or undermine her training will answer to me personally. He looked at Malak. I understand your fear. Understand your pain. But I'm asking you, as your king, as someone who's trying to build something better than what we had, give her a chance. Give us a chance. Let us prove that love and duty can coexist. That strength and connection aren't mutually exclusive. Malak held his gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, he bowed his head. Not in acceptance. Not in approval. Just an acknowledgement that the vote had been cast and the decision was made. As you command, my king. But I will be watching. And if she falters, if control slips even once, I will not hesitate to do what you might not be able to. I will end the threat before it consumes us all. It was the best they were going to get. A tenuous peace held together by political necessity and grudging compromise. Not the triumphant acceptance Aria had hoped for. Not the validation of their bond. Just permission to exist. To try. To prove herself worthy of the trust Damien had placed in her. The council began to disperse, alphas filing out with their delegations, conversations already starting about what this meant, how things would change, whether the Heartless King had truly found his heart or if this was all elaborate strategy. Aria stood beside Damien, watching them go, feeling the weight of expectations settling over her shoulders like a physical burden. "We won," Damien said quietly. "Not everything, but enough. They still don't trust me." Aria's voice was flat. "Half of them voted against me, and the other half only voted yes because the alternative was worse. That's how politics works. How change happens. One grudging compromise at a time. One small victory that leads to the next." His hand found hers again. "You spoke well. Showed them you understand the stakes. That you're willing to sacrifice if necessary. That took courage. It took honesty." She looked up at him. "I meant it. Everything I said. If it comes down to it, if I become the threat, you have to stop me. Have to choose the realm. Promise me. Promise me you won't let love make you weak when strength is what's needed." Damien's expression was anguished. "Don't ask me to promise that. Don't ask me to imagine a world where I have to." He stopped. Couldn't finish. The words too terrible to speak aloud. "I have to ask. Because we both know it's possible." Aria's hand came up to touch his face. "The prophecy isn't clear. The first flame didn't tell me how her story ended. Just that she made a choice and sacrificed everything. What if that's what's required? What if saving the realm means destroying myself in the process? I need to know you'll let me. That you won't try to save me at the expense of everyone else." "I can't." His voice broke. "I can't promise to watch you die. Can't promise to be the one who—" He pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. "Ask me anything else. Anything. But not that. Not that." They stood there, holding each other while the hall emptied around them. Two people who'd found each other against impossible odds, now facing the reality that finding each other might not be enough. That love might not save them. That the prophecy might demand a sacrifice neither of them was ready to make. Talia approached quietly, her expression grim. "My king. Aria. There's news. From the border." Shadow beasts were sighted near the eastern territories. Multiple packs. Moving with coordination instead of random chaos. And they're heading inland. Toward populated areas. The words cut through their moment like a knife. The darkness wasn't just coming. It was here. The convergence was beginning. The real battle was starting. Damien straightened immediately, his mask sliding back into place. The king instead of the man. How many? How organized? At least 50 confirmed. Possibly more. Talia's voice was steady but worried. "They're avoiding direct confrontation with patrol groups. Moving at night. Using intelligence instead of brute force. This isn't random. This is coordinated. Planned. Like something's controlling them." Aria felt cold spread through her chest. The convergence. The barriers between worlds weakening. Whatever's on the other side, it's testing us. Sending scouts. Preparing for something bigger. Damien nodded. "Send word to all territories. Increased patrols. Defensive positions. Pull civilian populations back from border areas. And tell Saris we need to accelerate Aria's training. Whatever timeline we thought we had, we don't. The darkness is here. And we need to be ready." Talia bowed and left quickly, already organizing, already moving to implement his commands. And Aria and Damien were left standing in the empty hall, feeling the weight of what was coming. The weight of choices not yet made but rapidly approaching. "It's starting." Aria's voice was barely a whisper. Everything the prophecy warned about. Everything the first flame faced. It's all starting. Then we face it. Damien's voice was firm. Certain. Together. Like we promised. We train. We prepare. We fight. And whatever choice you have to make when the moment comes, we'll face that too. But until then, we don't give up. We don't let fear win. We don't waste the time we have worrying about tragedies that might never happen. He kissed her. Hard. Desperate. Like he was trying to memorize the feel of her. The taste of her. The reality of her in his arms before something came along and tore them apart. "I love you. Whatever happens. Whatever you have to do. Whatever choice you make. I love you. And that's not weakness. That's the thing that gives me strength to face this. To fight for a world where maybe, someday, wolves like us can choose love without it costing everything." Aria kissed him back with equal desperation. equal love, equal fear of losing what they'd just found. I love you too. And I'll fight. I'll train. I'll become strong enough to face whatever's coming. Strong enough to make the right choice even when the right choice is impossible. They held each other in the empty hall while the torches burned down and the weight of destiny pressed closer. Two mates facing the end of the world. Two leaders accepting responsibility for more than their own survival. Two broken people who'd found each other and now had to figure out if love was enough to hold back darkness. The betrayal hadn't come from enemies. It had come from reality. From the terrible understanding that the bond between them, beautiful as it was, might not survive what was coming. That love, powerful as it was, might not be enough to change the ending already written in prophecy. That choosing each other might mean failing everyone else. But they'd made their choice. They'd stood together in front of the realm and refused to hide. Refused to pretend. Refused to let fear dictate their actions. Now they just had to live with the consequences. Whatever those consequences might be. And pray that when the real test came, when the darkness arrived and demanded its price, they'd both be strong enough to do what needed to be done. Even if doing it destroyed them both. The grand betrayal wasn't someone turning against them. It was destiny itself, revealing that sometimes love wasn't the answer. Sometimes sacrifice was. And sometimes the cruelest choice was the one between saving the person you loved and saving the world that needed you more. They just had to figure out which mattered more. Before the darkness made the choice for them. The attacks escalated over the next 3 weeks. Shadow beasts appearing in territories that had been safe for generations. Wolves disappearing from border patrols, their bodies found days later drained of life, emptied of everything that made them who they were. Ancient seals carved into stone by the first wolves, protections that had stood for centuries, cracking, crumbling, failing one by one as something on the other side pushed harder against the barriers between worlds. The convergence was accelerating. And with it, the pressure on Aria to be ready. To master her power. To become whatever the prophecy needed her to be before it was too late. She trained every day now. Dawn until dusk in that sacred cavern with Ceres pushing her past exhaustion, past fear, past every limitation she thought she had. Learning to hold larger flames for longer periods. Learning to shape the power with precision instead of raw force. Learning to channel ancient magic through her body without burning herself out completely. The mark on her shoulder blade was permanently warm now, glowing faintly even when she wasn't actively using power, like it was preparing for something. Like it knew the moment was coming and was gathering strength. Damien was with her when he could be. Standing at the edge of the sacred circle, watching with eyes that held pride and fear in equal measure. Sometimes he'd spar with her, testing her control under pressure, forcing her to maintain precision even when adrenaline and survival instinct were screaming. Other times he'd just sit and read while she trained, his presence grounding her, reminding her what she was fighting for. Who she was fighting for. The bond between them had deepened into something that felt like breathing. Essential. Automatic. She could feel him now even when they were apart. A constant awareness at the back of her mind, warm and solid and real. Could sense his emotions bleeding through the connection when he was angry or worried or exhausted from carrying the weight of the realm. And she knew he felt the same from her. Felt her fear and determination and the growing certainty that she was running out of time to master power that had taken the first flame decades to control. But there were good moments too. Stolen moments. Nights when the training was done and the council meetings were over and they could just be together. Walking through the fortress gardens under moonlight. Sharing meals in his private quarters where no one could watch or judge or remind them of responsibilities. Falling asleep tangled together, the bond humming between them, making them feel less alone in a world that was growing darker by the day. Aria had never been happier. Had never felt more seen, more valued, more certain that she belonged somewhere. And that made what was coming even more terrifying. Because now she had something to lose. Someone to lose. And the prophecy was very clear about what sacrifice meant. Everything. The call came at midnight on the first day of the new moon. The darkest night of the month, when shadows were deepest and the barriers between worlds were thinnest. Aria was asleep in Damien's bed. Had been sleeping there every night for weeks now, the pretense of separate quarters abandoned, when Talia burst through the door without knocking. They're here. At the northern border. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. The scouts say it's like the earth itself is vomiting darkness. Shadow beasts pouring through tears in reality. And there's something else. Something bigger. Something that's commanding them. Damien was up instantly, already reaching for clothes, for weapons, his mind shifting into battle mode with terrifying speed. How long until they reach civilian populations? Hours. Maybe less if they move fast. Talia's face was grim. Every alpha is mobilizing their forces. Every pack warrior is being called up. But it might not be enough. There are too many. And they're not fighting like animals. They're fighting like soldiers. Organized. Strategic. Controlled. Aria's heart was pounding. This was it. The moment. The convergence. The battle the prophecy had been warning about. She climbed out of bed, her hands shaking as she dressed in the leather armor Talia had insisted she keep ready. The sacred site. The one in the north. Where the first flame made her stand. That's where I need to be. That's where the power will be strongest. Saris appeared in the doorway, her ancient eyes sharp despite the late hour. She's right. The northern shrine is a nexus point. Where the barriers are weakest, but also where ancient magic is strongest. If she's going to have any chance of doing what the first flame did, holding back the darkness, that's where it has to happen. Damien turned to her, and the fear in his eyes nearly broke her heart. You're not ready. You've only been training for months. The first flame had decades. Centuries maybe. You can't. I have to. Aria's voice was steady even though everything inside her was screaming. This is what the mark means. What the prophecy points to. Why I'm here. I have to try. Because if I don't, if I hide or run or wait until I feel ready, there won't be anyone left to protect. She crossed to him, placing her hands on his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath her palms. I need you to get everyone to safety. Every civilian. Every non-combatant. Pull them back to the fortress. Fortify the defenses. And if I fail, if the darkness breaks through, you seal the fortress. You survive. You rebuild. You don't throw your life away trying to save me. No. The word was flat. Absolute. I'm coming with you. Fighting beside you. Whatever happens, we face it together. That's what we promised. And I'm releasing you from that promise. Aria's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. Because someone has to survive this. Someone has to lead if I fall. And that someone is you. The realm needs its king. Needs someone strong enough to hold things together after she couldn't finish. Couldn't say the words that would make it real. Damien grabbed her shoulders, his grip almost painful. Don't you dare. Don't you dare say goodbye. Don't you dare act like this is the end. We're going together. We're fighting together. And we're surviving together. That's the only option I'm accepting. Damien. No. He pulled her against him, his arms crushing her close, his face buried in her hair. I didn't find you just to lose you. Didn't claim you as my mate just to watch you sacrifice yourself. Didn't fall in love with you just to let you burn yourself out saving everyone else. We find another way. We face this together. Or we don't face it at all. The bond between them was blazing now, silver fire meeting shadow, their emotions tangling until she couldn't tell where her fear ended and his began. She wanted to argue. Wanted to make him understand that sometimes love meant letting go. That sometimes sacrifice was the only answer. But there was no time. The darkness was at the border. And every second they wasted arguing was a second closer to catastrophe. Then we go. Now. Together. She pulled back enough to look him in the eyes. But promise me. Promise me that if it comes down to it, if I tell you to run, you'll listen. You'll choose the realm. You'll be the king they need even if it destroys you. Damien's jaw clenched. Every line of his body radiated resistance. But finally, with visible effort, he nodded once. If you tell me to run. If it's truly the only way. I'll listen. But I won't forgive you for it. Won't forgive either of us for not being strong enough to find another option. It was the best she was going to get. A grudging compromise that neither of them wanted but both of them understood was necessary. She kissed him hard, desperately, pouring everything she felt into that contact, love and fear and gratitude and sorrow for all the time they wouldn't have. All the future being stolen before they could live it. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "Whatever happens. However this ends. I love you. And meeting you, being your mate, it was worth everything. Worth running. Worth the exile. Worth the pain. All of it. Because it led me to you. I love you too." His voice broke. "And this isn't goodbye. It can't be. We're going to survive this. Both of us. And then we're going to build the future we deserve. The one where mates don't have to choose between love and duty. Where power doesn't demand sacrifice. Where we get to just be together without the weight of prophecy and destiny crushing us." It was a beautiful dream. A beautiful lie. But they clung to it as they armed themselves, as they strode through corridors filled with wolves preparing for battle, as they emerged into the courtyard where horses waited and warriors were gathering with weapons and grim determination. The northern border was 3 hours' hard ride. 3 hours while the darkness crept closer. 3 hours to say everything and nothing. To hold hands and share glances and pretend they weren't both terrified of what was coming. Talia rode at their side, along with Saris and a contingent of the king's guard. Other wolves joined them as they traveled, alphas with their warriors, packs responding to the call, everyone moving toward the same destination. Toward the northern shrine where the first flame had made her stand centuries ago. Where Aria would either save them all or fail spectacularly trying. They reached the site just as the sky began to lighten with false dawn. But the darkness was already there. Thick. Viscous. Wrong in ways that made every instinct scream. It wasn't natural darkness, the absence of light. It was darkness that consumed light. That ate reality. That turned everything it touched into shadow and emptiness and nothing. The northern shrine stood at the center of a massive clearing, ancient stones arranged in patterns that hummed with residual power. And at the far edge of that clearing, pouring through tears in the fabric of reality itself, came the shadow beasts. Hundreds of them. Thousands. Creatures made of nightmare and malice, their forms shifting and unstable, their eyes burning with hunger that had nothing to do with physical need and everything to do with the desire to consume, to destroy, to unmake everything that existed. And behind them, standing at the largest tear, silhouetted against the wrongness bleeding through, was something else. Something massive. Something that radiated power and intelligence and ancient, patient malevolence. The thing commanding them. The thing orchestrating this invasion. The darkness the prophecy had warned about. It looked at Aria across the clearing, and she felt its attention like a physical weight. Like being crushed. Like drowning. It knew her. Recognized her. Had been waiting for her. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. The darkness had come for her specifically. For the silver flame. For the one thing in this realm that could stand against it. And it wanted to test her. To see if she was worthy. To discover if she could do what the first flame had done, or if she'd break and burn and fail like every other mortal who'd tried to wield power beyond their understanding. Damien's hand found hers. "Tell me what you need." Aria took a breath. Let it out. Felt the mark on her shoulder blazing hot enough to make her gasp. Felt the power inside her responding to the darkness, recognizing threat, preparing for war. "I need time. Need to reach the center of the shrine. Need to connect with the ancient magic woven into those stones. If I can do that, if I can channel what the first flame left behind, I might be able to create a barrier. Something strong enough to hold them back while we figure out how to close those tears permanently." "How long?" "I don't know. Minutes. Hours. However long it takes." She looked at him. "Can you give me that? Can you hold them off long enough for me to do this?" Damien's expression hardened into something fierce and terrible and absolutely certain. He turned to the assembled wolves, hundreds of them now, every major alpha, every elite warrior, every wolf who'd answered the call to defend their realm. "We hold this line. We protect the shrine. We give Aria whatever time she needs. No shadow beast reaches the center. No darkness touches her while she's channeling. We stand here. We fight here. And we do not fall. Understood. A roar of agreement echoed through the clearing. Wolves drawing weapons. Shifting into combat forms. Taking positions around the shrine in concentric circles of defense. Ready to die if necessary. Ready to sacrifice everything to give one marked wolf the chance to save them all. Aria wanted to tell them to run. Wanted to scream that this wasn't their fight, that they shouldn't throw their lives away for someone who might not even succeed. But she knew they wouldn't listen. This was their realm. Their home. Their families and packs and everything they loved. And they'd chosen to stand. Chosen to fight. Chosen to believe that maybe, possibly, she could do what seemed impossible. She kissed Damien one more time. Quick. Fierce. Full of everything she couldn't say. Then she ran toward the shrine, toward the ancient stones waiting at the center, her heart pounding and the mark on her shoulder burning like a brand. Behind her, the battle began. Shadow beasts crashed against the first line of defense like a wave of living darkness. Wolves met them with steel and claw and fangs, fighting with everything they had. The sound was deafening, screams and roars, and the terrible sound of reality tearing as more creatures poured through the rifts. Aria could feel the wrongness of them, the way they absorbed life force, drained light, turned everything they touched into empty husks. But she couldn't look back. Couldn't let herself see who was falling, who was dying to buy her time. She had to focus. Had to reach the center. Had to do what she'd come here to do. The shrine responded to her presence immediately. The stones began to glow, silver light answering the silver mark on her shoulder. Ancient magic recognizing ancient power. The first flame's presence was here, woven into the very foundation of this place. Aria could feel her, not just memory, but actual consciousness, preserved somehow in the magic, waiting for this moment. She dropped to her knees at the center stone, pressing both palms flat against its surface. The contact was like lightning. Power surged through her, more than she'd ever channeled, more than she knew how to contain. The first flame's magic flooding into her, merging with her own, trying to show her what to do, how to shape it, how to create the barrier that had protected the realm centuries ago. But it was too much. Too fast. Aria screamed as the power threatened to tear her apart from the inside, burning through mortal limitations, demanding more than her body could give. She could feel herself starting to fracture, to break, to become something other than wolf, other than human, other than anything except pure burning power with no anchor to reality. No. She gritted her teeth, forcing control, forcing will against the torrent threatening to consume her. Not like this. Not by losing myself. I am Aria. I am marked. I am mate. I am wolf. I am not just power. I am the person who wields it. And I choose how this goes. The magic fought her. Wanted to take over. Wanted to use her as vessel instead of partner. But Aria had spent months learning control. Months understanding that she wasn't the power, she directed it. Shaped it. Used it for purpose instead of being used by it. She grabbed that wild, ancient magic and forced it into the pattern Ceres had taught her. The pattern the first flame had used. A weaving of intention and will and absolute commitment. She poured everything into it. Love for Damien, loyalty to Talia, respect for Ceres, even compassion for Malak and his pain. Every connection she'd made. Every reason she had to protect this realm. Every wolf fighting and dying outside the shrine to give her this chance. The barrier began to form. Silver fire erupting from the shrine stones, rising into the sky, spreading outward in a dome of pure concentrated will. It met the darkness and held. Pushed back. Created a wall between the shadow beasts and the wolves defending the shrine. The creatures screamed sounds that weren't quite sound, more like reality itself shrieking in pain as the barrier burned them, dissolved them, sent them back to whatever hell they'd crawled from. But maintaining it was agony. Aria could feel the power eating through her reserves, consuming her life force, demanding more and more and more. She was burning out. Just like the witch who'd killed Malak's mate. Just like everyone feared. She could hold the barrier for minutes. Maybe an hour. But not forever. Not long enough to close the rifts. Not long enough to actually win. She was failing. Despite everything. Despite training and love and determination. She wasn't strong enough. Wasn't powerful enough. Was just a girl with a mark trying to do what a centuries-old guardian had barely managed. And then she felt it. Through the bond. Damien's presence. Not just emotional support. Actual power. He was feeding her strength through the mate bond, pouring his alpha magic into her, giving her everything he had to help maintain the barrier. She could feel him in her mind, solid and certain and refusing to let her burn alone. You're not alone. You've never been alone. Use me. Use the bond. Take what you need. Other presences joined. Talia. Saris. The alphas fighting below. Every wolf in the clearing who understood what she was trying to do opened themselves to the connection, offering their strength, their life force, their will to help hold back the darkness. Hundreds of wolves creating a network of power, all flowing through Aria, all channeling through the mate bond with Damien at the center, all working together to create something stronger than any individual could manage alone. This was what the first flame had been trying to show her. This was the choice. Not between sacrifice and salvation. Not between burning alone or letting the darkness win. But between trying to do everything yourself or trusting others to help carry the burden. Between being a lone warrior or being part of something bigger. The barrier blazed brighter. Stronger. Fed by hundreds of wolves working in concert. And Aria stood at the center, no longer trying to control everything, just guiding it. Directing it. Weaving individual threads of power into something that could actually hold. Actually protect. Actually save them all. The massive darkness at the center of the largest rift watched her with something that might have been respect. Or rage. Or recognition that she'd figured out what it hadn't expected. That mortal wolves working together were stronger than any ancient evil standing alone. It roared, a sound that made reality shudder, and began to pull back. The rifts started closing. The shadow beasts stopped coming. The invasion retreated not because it was defeated, but because it had tested them and found them wanting. Found them too strong. Too unified. Too willing to stand together against impossible odds. Within minutes, the tears in reality had sealed. The darkness had withdrawn. The convergence had passed. And standing at the center of the shrine, surrounded by silver fire and connected to hundreds of wolves through bonds of magic and will and absolute commitment. Aria had done it. She'd held back the darkness. Not by sacrificing herself. Not by burning out completely. But by trusting. By accepting help. By understanding that she didn't have to carry this burden alone. The barrier held for another moment. Then, with her purpose completed, Aria let it go. Let the power drain back into the shrine stones. Let the magic return to whatever ancient source had fed it. Let herself be just Aria again, exhausted, drained, barely able to stand, but alive. She collapsed. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. Damien. Of course it was Damien. He was always there. Always catching her. Always refusing to let her fall. He cradled her against his chest, and she could feel his heart pounding, could feel his hands shaking as they held her, could feel the absolute terror and relief pouring through the bond. You did it. His voice was rough. You actually did it. Held them back. Saved everyone. Without destroying yourself in the process. Without sacrificing everything. You found another way. We did it. Aria corrected weakly. All of us. Every wolf who fed me power. Every alpha who trusted me. You, giving me your strength through the bond. I couldn't have done it alone. Didn't need to do it alone. That was the lesson. That was what the prophecy meant. Not that I had to choose between salvation and destruction. But that salvation comes from connection. From trust. From being willing to ask for help instead of trying to be strong enough to stand alone. Around them, wolves were cheering. Celebrating. Embracing each other with the kind of joy that comes from surviving something that should have killed them. The darkness was gone. The convergence had passed. And they were alive. All of them. Battered and exhausted but alive. Saris approached slowly, her ancient face showing something that looked like pride. Like satisfaction. Like the validation of centuries spent waiting. The first flame would be proud. You did what she couldn't. Found the balance she was searching for. Saved the realm without destroying yourself. Without sacrificing everything for duty. She knelt beside them, her weathered hand touching Aria's forehead gently. The mark will fade now. Not disappear. But fade. Because you fulfilled your purpose. Proven yourself worthy. And now you get to choose what comes next. You can keep the power, master it fully, become the guardian this realm needs. Or you can let it go. Return to being just a wolf. Just a mate. Just someone who gets to live without the weight of prophecy defining every choice. Aria looked up at Damien. At the man who'd hunted her and saved her and loved her enough to fight beside her instead of trying to protect her from herself. What do you think? Should I keep it? Keep the power? Or let it go and just be normal? Damien's smile was soft. Genuine. Free of the coldness and control that had defined him for so long. I think you get to choose. For yourself. Not for prophecy. Not for the realm. Not even for me. Whatever you decide, whatever you want, I'll support it. Because you've earned that right. You've proven you can be trusted with power. Which means you've also earned the right to walk away from it if that's what you want. Aria thought about it. About the months of training. About the terror of holding more power than she knew how to control. About the burden of carrying ancient magic and prophecy and expectations. But she also thought about how it felt. That moment when the barrier had blazed to life. When hundreds of wolves had trusted her to protect them. When she'd been strong enough to save everyone. I keep it. The words came out certain. Clear. But on my terms. I master it fully. Learn to control it completely. And I use it to protect. To build. To create instead of destroy. I become the guardian this realm needs. Not because prophecy demands it. But because I choose it. Because it's who I want to be. She looked around at the wolves gathering close, Talia with tears streaming down her face, Malek standing at a distance, but no longer radiating hatred, Stellan nodding approval, dozens of alphas and warriors who'd fought beside her and lived to see the dawn. And I do it with all of you. Build something better together. Create a realm where power doesn't demand sacrifice. Where different doesn't mean dangerous. Where we face darkness as a united force instead of fractured packs too afraid to trust each other. Damien pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Then that's what we build. Together. Starting now. Starting with showing everyone that the Heartless King found his heart and it didn't destroy him. It saved him. Saved all of us. The sun broke over the horizon, painting the clearing in shades of gold and rose. Painting the assembled wolves in light that made them look heroic. Legendary. Like the beginning of something new instead of the end of something old. And at the center of it all, held in the arms of her mate, surrounded by wolves who'd chosen to stand beside her, Aria finally understood. The prophecy hadn't been about choosing between salvation and destruction. It had been about choosing connection over isolation. Trust over fear. Love over duty. Working together instead of trying to carry impossible burdens alone. She was the silver flame. The marked one. The heir to ancient power. But she was also Aria. Mate. Guardian. Wolf who'd learned that strength came from connection instead of isolation. That power was best wielded with help instead of alone. That sometimes the bravest choice wasn't sacrifice, it was surviving. It was building. It was refusing to let darkness win by refusing to become darkness yourself. The mark on her shoulder pulsed once more. Then settled. No longer burning. No longer demanding. Just warm. Present. A reminder of what she was and what she'd chosen to become. And as Damien helped her to her feet, as they stood together facing their realm with the dawn breaking around them, Aria knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. She'd claimed her power. Not by letting it consume her, but by mastering it, directing it, using it for purpose instead of being used by it. And now she got to live, to love, to build the future she'd been fighting for all along. The darkness had tested them, and they'd passed, together, united, proving that sometimes the greatest power wasn't in standing alone but in refusing to stand alone. In trusting. In loving. In being willing to accept help even when accepting help felt like weakness. That was the real lesson. The real prophecy. The real salvation. And Aria, the silver flame who'd learned to burn without being consumed, finally understood what it meant to be free. The fortress was different after the battle. Not in physical ways, the stone walls still stood strong, the towers still reached toward the sky, the courtyards still echoed with the sounds of training and daily life. But something had shifted in the air itself. In the way wolves moved through the corridors. In the way they looked at each other. In the way they looked at her. Aria walked through the Great Hall 3 weeks after the convergence, and wolves bowed their heads. Not in fear. Not in obligation. In respect. In gratitude. In recognition that she'd stood at the northern shrine and held back darkness that should have consumed them all. That she'd proven herself worthy of the mark she carried. Worthy of the power. Worthy of standing beside their king as his mate and equal. It should have felt like victory. Like everything she'd ever wanted. Acceptance. Belonging. A place where she didn't have to hide or run or pretend to be less than she was. And in many ways, it did feel like that. Like coming home after years of wandering. Like finding family after being cast out and told she was too dangerous to love. But there were still shadows. Still wolves who looked at her with wariness instead of trust. Still whispers in corners about what would happen if she lost control. If the power overwhelmed her. If the darkness returned and she wasn't strong enough the second time. Fear didn't disappear just because you'd proven yourself once. It lingered. Waited. Looked for new reasons to justify itself. Malak had stayed. That surprised her more than anything. He'd approached her 2 days after the battle, his expression still guarded but no longer actively hostile. "You reminded me of something I'd forgotten," he'd said quietly. "That power doesn't make you evil. Fear of power makes you dangerous." My mate wasn't cursed. She was just alone. Trying to carry everything by herself because she thought asking for help was weakness. If she'd had what you have. A mate who understood, a realm willing to support her, teachers who could guide instead of condemn, maybe she'd still be alive. He'd looked away, jaw tight with emotion he was clearly unused to showing. "I can't promise I'll ever fully trust you. Can't promise I won't watch for signs that control is slipping. But I can promise I won't actively work against you. Won't undermine your training or poison other alphas against you. You've earned that much. And maybe, given time, you'll earn more." It wasn't friendship. Wasn't even alliance really. Just the absence of active hostility. The beginning of something that might eventually become respect. It was enough. More than enough considering where they'd started. Now Aria stood at the window of Damien's private study, their study now, since she'd essentially moved in completely, looking out over the fortress grounds where wolves trained and lived and built the kind of peace her father's generation had said was impossible. Where different packs mixed freely. Where power was shared instead of hoarded. Where the Lycan King ruled not through fear alone but through strength tempered with compassion. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind. Damien's chin rested on her shoulder, his warmth solid and real against her back. "You're thinking too loud. I can feel it through the bond. The doubts. The questions. The wondering if this is real or if it's all going to fall apart." Aria leaned back into him, letting his presence ground her the way it always did. "Is it selfish? To be happy when we know the darkness is still out there? When we know this was just the first test, not the final battle? When there are still wolves who fear me and probably always will? It's human." Damien's voice was quiet. Thoughtful. "It's what makes you different from the old guardians. From warriors who were so focused on duty they forgot to live. You fought. You survived. And now you're allowing yourself to enjoy what you fought for. That's not selfish. That's healthy." He turned her to face him, his hands cupping her face with a gentleness that still surprised her sometimes. The Heartless King who'd learned to be soft with the one person who'd earned his trust completely. The darkness will come again. Different form maybe. Different threat. But it will come. That's the nature of balance. Light and dark. Good and evil. creation and destruction. There's always another battle. Always another challenge. His thumb traced along her cheekbone. But between those battles, we get to live. Get to love. Get to build something worth protecting. And when the next threat arrives, we face it the same way we face this one. Together. United. Refusing to let fear separate us or make us forget what we're fighting for. Aria pressed her forehead against his. I love you. I don't think I say it enough. Don't think I express how much it means that you never gave up on me. Never looked at me and saw monster. Always saw person. Always saw potential. I love you too. Damien's smile was soft. Real. The expression of a man who'd found something he'd stopped believing existed. And I'm going to keep loving you through whatever comes next. Through training and politics and the next convergence and every challenge this realm throws at us. Because you're mine. And I'm yours. And that bond. That connection. It's the strongest magic either of us will ever wield. A knock interrupted the moment. Talia's voice came through the door. My king. Aria. There are visitors. From the Silvermoon territory. They're requesting an audience. Silvermoon. Aria's old pack. The territory that had exiled her. The wolves who'd called her cursed and thrown her out rather than trying to understand what she was. Her stomach clenched with old pain, old anger, old hurt that hadn't fully healed despite everything. Damien's expression hardened. Send them away. She doesn't owe them anything. Doesn't need to face wolves who rejected her. But Aria shook her head. No. Let them in. I want to hear what they have to say. Want to face them as I am now instead of who I was when they cast me out. She looked up at Damien. I'm not afraid of them anymore. Not ashamed. They don't have power over me. And maybe it's time they understood that. They walked to the great hall together, fingers intertwined, presenting a united front. The visitors were already waiting, 5 wolves in formal clothes bearing the silver and blue colors of Silvermoon territory. And at the center, looking older and more worn than Aria remembered, stood her father. The sight of him hit like a physical blow. Alpha Marcus. The wolf who'd sired her, raised her, trained her to be his heir. The wolf who'd looked at her with pride right up until the moment her first shift had gone wrong. Who'd voted to exile his only daughter rather than defend her. Who'd chosen his position over his child and called it duty. He looked at her now, and something in his expression cracked. Pain. Regret. Shame. All the emotions he'd been too proud to show when it mattered. When she'd needed him most. Aria. His voice was rough. Uncertain. Like he didn't know if he had the right to speak her name. You look well. Strong. The reports we heard, what you did at the Northern Shrine, he stopped. Started again. I came to apologize. To say that we were wrong. I was wrong. You weren't cursed. You were powerful. And I was too afraid, too invested in tradition, too concerned with what other packs would think, to see it. The words she'd dreamed of hearing for over a year. The validation she'd craved. The acknowledgement that she hadn't been the problem. That they had. That her exile had been about their fear, not her failure. But standing here now, with Damien beside her and the mark on her shoulder no longer burning with shame, but glowing with purpose, she realized something. She didn't need his apology. Didn't need his validation. Didn't need anything from him at all. Because she'd built a life without him. Found family in wolves who'd chosen to stand beside her. Found love with a mate who saw her clearly and loved her anyway. Found purpose that went beyond making her father proud. I appreciate you coming. Her voice was steady. Calm. Free of the anger and hurt she'd carried for so long. I appreciate you acknowledging the mistake. But I'm not coming back. Not to Silvermoon. Not to being your heir. Not to any version of who I was before you cast me out. Marcus's face fell. Aria, please. The pack needs you. Needs your power. Needs. The pack needed me when I was 17 and terrified and had nowhere to go. Her voice went harder now. The pack needed me when I was starving in border towns, working jobs that barely paid enough to survive, running from hunters who wanted me dead or captured. The pack needed me when I was alone and powerless and convinced I was a monster. But you weren't there. None of you were there. You chose fear over family. Chose tradition over love. Chose to protect yourselves instead of protecting me. She stepped closer, and several of the Silver Moon wolves instinctively stepped back, responding to the power radiating from her. The presence she developed. The certainty that came from knowing exactly who and what she was. I've found my pack now. Found wolves who didn't wait until I'd proven myself before offering acceptance. Who stood beside me when I was weak instead of only wanting me when I became strong. And I'm not giving that up. Not for you. Not for Silvermoon. Not for anything. Damien's hand tightened around hers. Silent support. Silent pride in watching her face down the wolves who'd broken her and come out stronger for it. Marcus looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and seemed to finally understand what he'd lost. Not just a powerful wolf. Not just potential political advantage. But the girl he'd raised. The child he'd loved before fear had twisted that love into something conditional. Something that could be withdrawn the moment she stopped being who he wanted her to be. I'm sorry. The words came out broken. Genuine. I'm so sorry, Aria. Not because I want you back. Not because the pack needs you. But because I failed you. Because I was supposed to protect you and instead I cast you out. Because I let fear make me a coward and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. Tears were streaming down his face now. This proud alpha who'd spent decades building a reputation for strength, breaking down in front of his own delegation. But I'm glad. Glad you found something better. Glad you found people who deserve you. Glad you became this. He gestured at her, at Damien, at everything she'd built. Because if you'd stayed with us, if we'd accepted you, you might never have become who you are. Might never have found your mate. Might never have saved the entire realm. So maybe my failure was part of your destiny. Maybe you needed to be cast out to become who you were meant to be. It was a beautiful thought. A comforting narrative. The idea that her suffering had purpose. That her exile had been necessary for her growth. But Aria knew better. Knew that trauma didn't have to be meaningful to be survivable. That she would have been just as powerful, just as capable, just as worthy if she'd had support from the beginning. The pain hadn't made her stronger. Surviving the pain had made her stronger. And that was different. Maybe, she allowed. Or maybe I would have been just as strong with a pack that supported me. With a father who chose me over fear. We'll never know. But I forgive you. Not because you deserve it. Not because what you did was acceptable. But because holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you. And I'm done hurting. Done letting the past define my present. She turned to leave, to walk away from Silvermoon and everything it represented, but Marcus called out one more time. The mark. On your shoulder. Does it still burn? Aria paused. Looked back. No. It's warm. Present. A reminder of what I am and what I've chosen to become. But it doesn't burn anymore. Doesn't hurt. Because I'm not fighting it. Not ashamed of it. Not letting other people's fear convince me I'm wrong for being powerful. Good. Marcus smiled, sad and proud at the same time. That's good. That's how it should be. And Aria? I know I don't have the right. I know I lost the privilege. But I'm proud of you. Of who you've become. Of the strength you showed. Of the realm you helped save. Your mother, if she were still alive, she'd be proud too. The mention of her mother, dead 5 years now from illness that had taken her slowly, painfully, made Aria's throat tight. Thank you. For saying that. For coming. For acknowledging the mistake even though it doesn't change anything. It matters. Even though I don't need it, it still matters. Then she walked away. Damien beside her. Leaving Silvermoon behind for the final time. Not in anger. Not in pain. Just in acceptance that some chapters close and new ones begin, and you can't live in the past while trying to build a future. They walked through the fortress in comfortable silence until they reached the gardens. The place where they'd first walked in parallel, orbiting each other before the bond had fully formed. Before they'd admitted what they were to each other. The garden was in full bloom now, flowers responding to spring warmth, everything alive and growing and beautiful. Aria stopped at the center, where a fountain carved with wolf imagery sent water cascading over smooth stone. She turned to Damien, seeing him clearly in the afternoon light. Seeing the man who'd hunted her, saved her, loved her, stood beside her through everything. Do you ever wonder how we got here? Her voice was soft, reflective. How a runaway wolf with a curse and a king known for being heartless ended up becoming mates. Building something real? Surviving when everyone said we'd fail. Damien pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, holding her like she was precious. Like she was home. Every day. And every day I'm grateful. Grateful I kept searching. Grateful I found you in that cave. Grateful you were brave enough to stop running. Grateful you chose me even when choosing me meant danger and complication and becoming a target. He kissed her forehead, her temple, her lips. Soft and sweet and full of love that didn't need words. We're going to face more challenges. More darkness. More wolves who fear what we represent. But we'll face it together. We'll build something that lasts. We'll prove that love and power can coexist. That mates can be partners and equals. That strength comes from connection instead of isolation. Promise me something. Aria looked up at him. Promise me that no matter what comes, no matter how hard things get, we don't forget this. This moment. This feeling. This certainty that we're exactly where we're supposed to be. That we found each other against impossible odds, and we're going to keep choosing each other every single day. I promise. Damien's voice was absolute. Certain. Every day. Every moment. Every choice. I choose you. Choose us. Choose the future we're building together. And nothing, not darkness, not politics, not fear, not destiny, nothing will change that. They stood there in the garden, holding each other as the sun moved across the sky, as the fortress continued its daily rhythms around them, as the realm they'd fought to protect went about the business of living. Two people who'd been broken and lonely and convinced they were too dangerous to love. Two people who'd found each other and discovered that maybe, just maybe, being dangerous together was exactly what the world needed. The mark on Aria's shoulder pulsed once. Warm. Content. No longer a curse or a burden, but simply part of who she was. The silver flame who'd learned to burn without being consumed. The mate who'd found her match. The guardian who'd chosen to protect instead of destroy. And as Damien held her close, as the bond between them hummed with certainty and love and absolute commitment, Aria realized something profound. Something that made everything, the exile, the running, the fear, the pain, worth it. She'd found home. Not a place. Not a territory. But a person. A connection. A bond that transcended prophecy and destiny and every limitation she'd thought defined her existence. She'd found home in him, and he'd found home in her. And together, they were building something that would last. Something that would matter. Something that proved love wasn't weakness. It was the strongest magic of all. So here's the question I want to leave you with. Would you have chosen her? If you were in that clearing, watching a marked wolf with power that could destroy the realm, would you have stood beside her? Or would you have listened to the fear? Would you have been like Damien, seeing potential where everyone else saw threat? Or would you have been like her father, choosing safety over love, tradition over trust? Would you have voted to exile her? To test her? To give her one more chance even when all the evidence said she was too dangerous to tolerate? And what about Damien? Would you have risked everything, your throne, your authority, your carefully built reputation, for one runaway wolf who might be your mate? Would you have been brave enough to let the Heartless King find his heart? Or would you have told him to make the hard choice, to sacrifice love for duty, to remain alone because being alone was safer? These are the questions that haunt me. These are the choices that define us. Not the easy moments when right and wrong are clear, but the impossible moments when love and duty collide. When power and connection seem mutually exclusive. When choosing someone means risking everything. Aria and Damien chose each other. Chose to believe that love could make them stronger instead of weaker. Chose to face darkness together instead of alone. And they survived. They built something beautiful. They proved that sometimes the bravest choice isn't sacrifice, it's surviving. It's loving. It's refusing to let fear win. But their story isn't over. The darkness will return. New challenges will arise. New choices will have to be made. And every time, they'll have to decide again, is love worth the risk? Is connection worth the vulnerability? Is being together worth the danger it invites? I think it is. I think love is always worth it. Even when it's hard. Even when it's dangerous. Even when the entire world is telling you to choose safety over connection. Because wolves like Aria, wolves who are powerful and different and marked by destiny, they don't need to be feared. They need to be supported. They need to be believed in. They need to find their Damien. The one person who looks at them and sees not a weapon or a threat, but a person worth loving, worth protecting, worth standing beside no matter what darkness comes calling. And if this story lit something inside you, if you felt Aria's pain and Damien's love and the terrible beauty of two broken people becoming whole together, then subscribe to Shayla's Romance Library. Because here, we don't tell soft stories. We don't tell safe stories. We tell the ones that burn. The ones that make you feel every emotion, question every choice, and believe, even when believing seems impossible, that love can survive anything if you're brave enough to choose it. We tell stories about marked wolves and heartless kings. About exile and redemption. About power that terrifies and love that heals. About the moment when you have to decide, do you run from what you are, or do you stand and fight for who you want to become? Aria chose to stand. Damien chose to love. And together, they chose to build a future where different doesn't mean dangerous. Where power and connection coexist. Where mates stand together against darkness and refuse to let destiny write their ending. So subscribe. Join the library. Become part of the pack that believes in fierce love and complicated choices and the kind of romance that doesn't apologize for being intense. That doesn't shy away from hard questions. That doesn't pretend love is always enough, but shows you how to make it enough through will and commitment and the absolute refusal to give up. Because Aria's story? It's just beginning. And the darkness? It's just waiting. And the next time it rises, the next time impossible choices have to be made, I want you there. Experiencing it. Feeling it. Understanding why love is worth fighting for even when fighting seems hopeless. Is she a hero? Or just a girl cursed with too much fire and not enough fear? Is he a king? Or just a man who finally found something worth being vulnerable for? The answer is both. Always both. Complicated and beautiful and real. Just like the best love stories always are. Welcome to Shayla's Romance Library, where we tell tales that burn. And darling, we're just getting started.